day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, January 5th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ryan Grimm, Washington Bureau Chief for The Intercept, co-host of Counterpoints, and author, the most recent, is it The Squad?
Yes. Yes.
We will, first question we're going to ask him. Also on the program today, fears grow of expanded Israel war ambitions and U.S. involvement.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, Israeli officials now openly planning for Israeli settlements in Gaza. Elizabeth Warren, the latest to call for Israel aid to be conditioned. The economy outpaces expectations, adds 216,000 jobs in December. Elon Musk, through SpaceX, suing to find the National Labor Relations Board unconstitutional in its existence.
The everyman billionaire.
FDA allows Florida to buy low-cost Canadian drugs.
Good.
Republican impeachment plan hits a speed bump. They ran into evidence that Trump was actually corrupt.
No.
U.S. millionaires sitting on $8.5 trillion of untaxed profits in 2022. Homicides drop an average of 10% in U.S. major cities. Other crimes, too, if you can believe it. Study now suggests that more than 17,000 people in about 5 different countries died from taking hydroxychloroquine. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is
Casual Friday.
Casual Friday. Our first Casual Friday of the year. Don't have a second guest because when we don't have school, when we don't have class, when we don't have the show on Monday, I'm always a day behind. And so I didn't, but next week we're going to have the second guest.
Yes.
I'm not going to say who.
And we're also without Bradley, so it's like.
We're also without Bradley.
We could have Ryan Grimm to try to do some comedy.
Ryan Grimm is always amusing. Mm-hmm. And so.
Stand-up amuser.
We'll see what kind of tie he wears today, Sam, so you can roast him again.
Well, I didn't roast him last time. It wasn't so much the tie, it was the Windsor knot. And it apparently I got under his skin.
You hit a nerve.
And I've heard from him quite a bit. So we'll see what he wears on the show. I'd be surprised if he doesn't show up with the tie.
Yeah.
Let's get into this. We'll have another clip a little bit later and talk more about that study about hydroxychloroquine, which, it's one study, but it suggests, the study does, that it actually, when you have a lot of people take a drug that is for a specific thing and it's not called for, there are always adverse impacts from drugs of any form whatsoever. But that perhaps 17,000 people, maybe more, died from taking hydroxychloroquine across 4 or 5 countries. We'll get to that later. But as COVID is surging, and it is surging. Now, we don't have a sense of it in the same way because we don't get daily reports anymore. We still have 200 plus people a day dying. That is double what the normal rate was back in 2019 of more than double of the daily deaths from the flu. But between the flu and COVID and RSV that is floating around there, I know at one local hospital they have reinstituted mask mandates because these lunatics who are doctors and health officials think that masks somehow prevent respiratory diseases or inhibits the spread of respiratory diseases. So these crazies at the hospital decided to institute a mask mandate at the hospital to protect both people who are, vulnerable at a hospital. You're vulnerable, and also others coming into the hospital because others may have it coming in there. And I know that sounds just insane that these doctors, they're still in the,
they have the COVID mind virus.
Still have the COVID mind virus with their surgeries where they're not breathing.
Fauci brainwashed.
Yeah. But the latest that's going around, and we'll talk about this later in the program about one study that is purporting that, I don't know what even it purports, to be honest with you, because of the way that it's presented, but that there were people examined who supposedly are dying from the COVID vaccine. I would be shocked if no one has died from the COVID vaccine in the history of its being administered. Hundreds of millions of COVID vaccine shots have been given. I would be shocked if we didn't lose people to the flu vaccine every year. In fact, every vaccine that exists, I'd be shocked if we had no deaths whatsoever. In the same way that I would be shocked if we had no deaths from people going under anesthesia for a colonoscopy on any given year, or people who have adverse reactions to Tylenol or Advil. This is the reality. But nevertheless, in Ron DeSantis's land of sort of like Disneyland.
Yeah.
Except for without
the wokeness.
Without the wokeness.
Just a lot more death in COVID. In a state that is famous for old people living in, by the way.
His Surgeon General is basically saying they want to outlaw the mRNA vaccine. And here he is on Steve Bannon to explain why. And interesting theory from this supposed doctor.
Other streaming services or podcasts, whatever, the mainstream media immediately, the Mediaites of the world, the Media Matters, it's all of a sudden, we're conspiracy theory guys, we're kooks, that we're talking about, keeping people away from this tremendous vaccine that saves so many lives. What evidence do you point to? Because I know you're a man of science. That's where you came and took the Surgeon General.
Pause it for 1 second. I just want to highlight that. The reason why he's there is because he's a man of science. Continue, please.
Away from this tremendous vaccine that saves so many lives. What evidence do you point to? Because I know you're a man of science. That's where you came and took the Surgeon General. I think you were at UCLA after Harvard. You came and took the Surgeon General job under Governor DeSantis, because you actually wanted to get this out into the field. What evidence do you point to that backs up your contention?
Yeah. Well, the great news here is the evidence has been completely provided by the FDA. So it's their evidence. And the evidence is a combination of their guidance documents in the past that acknowledge the risk of DNA integration and the need to test for it to make sure you're not fouling up the human genome. Their evidence is their acknowledgement that there is DNA in there, and that's been found to be billions of particles, small particles of DNA with each dose in at least one study. And they've acknowledged, because we asked them specifically whether they have tested for this. And they gave a non-answer. They talked about a bunch of other things, and they never answered the question, which I infer to mean that they haven't tested for it. So it's literally all their evidence. And I'm not saying, frankly, I think it probably does have some integration at some levels with the human genome, because these vaccines are honestly, they're the antichrist of all products. So I think it probably does.
Science?
But I'm not saying it does. I'm saying that they themselves have said you should test for it. And it hasn't happened. And they've provided no proof that it's happened. And that's so wrong. It's just complete disrespect to the human genome and the importance of protecting it and preserving it. And that is our connection to God.
Now, that pause is Steve Bannon going, wait, science guy. Just a couple of notes that I took here. One, that there's DNA particles that are integrating with the human genome.
And stop fouling up that human genome, okay?
It's our bridge to Jesus.
I'm not sure I fully get how vaccination goes to the genome.
Also, it's mRNA, not DNA. These are separate things.
If you listen closely, he's not saying that either. He's just saying that you haven't proven that it doesn't in any way.
Right. They haven't tested for our insane theory that there is particles in the mRNA vaccines that foul up the godly human genome.
Now, Ashish Jha, who is the dean of Brown University's public health school. Now, to be fair, he also worked in the the White House National Coronavirus Response before stepping down last year. Quote, "This idea of DNA fragments, it's scientific nonsense. People who understand how these vaccines are made and administered understand there is no risk here." Hospitalizations have been on the rise nationally. That's from this. It's one of the most studied vaccines at this point, said the CDC director, Mandy Cohen. The FDA, which is authorized, stressed the shot's, quote, safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing quality. So he's listening to the FDA up to a certain point. But the scientific evidence that he's brought on, and this is a guy now who is trying to, who called for a halt on using these vaccines in Florida and probably all around the world, is, and I'm going to quote here, it's probably the Antichrist of vaccines. Probably the Antichrist of vaccines, which I think is a scientific term.
See, it's so weird how the purity of one's body, and you can kind of see these religious constructions being grafted onto anti-vax conspiracy theories. Like, they just genuinely don't want certain things being put into their body because it might poison them in some satanic way. I mean, they'll eat any processed food or exist in society and consume what they want.
They won't eat the Antichrist of food.
But for some reason, the Antichrist of medicine is what they're most concerned about. Odd.
The Surgeon General of a state scoffing at the idea that the vaccines saved lives.
And the idea, too, like, I love when right-wingers do this. They're so dismissive of credentialism and, like, scientific consensus and all of the academia that goes into science and being a doctor until it serves their interests, until Steve Bannon can be like, oh, you're credible, UCLA here, as opposed to the fact that he's obviously a crank when it comes to the field.
He is a Harvard-trained physician and researcher who had not specialized in infectious disease.
Sometimes you want a new set of eyes on the problem.
Exactly. The FDA, we stand firmly behind our regulatory decision-making with the authorizations and approval of the COVID-19 vaccines.
We're not swayed by the Antichrist argument.
The Antichrist argument did not come up in the FDA's. But it's interesting in that they don't research whether it is the Antichrist of vaccines.
That's pretty
They haven't tested
disrespectful
for
to
it.
science. Pretty disrespectful to science. Not to just look into if this is an Antichrist.
I mean, Lepardo
product.
has been calling for it. He said, can you look into the Antichrist particles? And the FDA won't do it. So what does that say?
The former Florida Surgeon General said, cited data showing that 8,000 COVID deaths in Florida last year the vast majority are likely to be vaccine preventable if people are up to date on their current vaccines.
But you become what? Possessed by a demon, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, the only
guess.
problem is the next strain associated with being able to spin your head around.
Don't tell that, Pete. Yeah.
It's just one more reason not to get vaccinated because you get possessed by the devil.
You revealed
Help you
that
get up
too
and
soon.
downstairs, though.
Yeah.
There you go. Allows you to levitate. That's right. But then I don't know. I'm citing The Exorcist, and that's like 100 years old. That movie. So, folks, we'll be talking to Ryan Grimm and find out what his latest book title is in just a moment. But in the meantime, today's program sponsored by my favorite sponsor, SunsetLakeCBD.com. Use the code LEFTISBEST. You get 20% off. 20% off everything from like their new line of gummies. They've got the Focus gummies. I've been hitting these hard
Oh, yeah?
lately. Yes.
I'm using those sleep gummies as well.
Yeah, well, I always did those. I'm just
Yeah.
adding to my repertoire. These are the sleep gummies. The Focus gummies have lion's mane, cordyceps, and CBD. The cordyceps, freak me out just a little bit because I'm watching that HBO show about when the mushrooms take over people's bodies.
Oh,
But
I don't know.
I think it's called cordyceps. I'm not sure. But they also have one that is, they have this one for focus. They have ones for relaxation with mushrooms. They also have the vibe ones with a tiny bit of THC in the CBD.
Get
They
me
also
every time
have
with that.
smokables, pre-rolls and flowers and keef.
Keith.
And they also have great lotions. I have this nearby. They have salves, a couple of different ones for your muscles, some ones with lidocaine and ones with other stuff. I can't remember, but that one I use for my eczema. They have fudge. They make for great gifts. They're also just in tinctures for sleep with melatonin, different dosage sizes. Also a great company. They have contributed tens of thousands of dollars to things like strike funds, refugee resettlement, carceral reform, to give directly to Planned Parenthood. They raised money for food pantries, and in the wake of the Vermont floods last year, they also do great farming practices, integrated pest management. They also don't use any pesticides. They use regenerative farming, so they take care of the land. And they have great business practices, mostly employee-owned, $20 minimum wage, just an all-around great company. Also, I like their merch. I'm not going to lie. So check it out. SunsetLakeCBD.com. Left is best. Gets you 20% off. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Ryan Grimm. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the program Ryan Grimm. He is the Washington Bureau Chief for The Intercept, also one of the co-hosts on Counterpoint, and author of, I believe now, 3 books. And the third is The Squad, AOC and the Hope of a Political Revolution, which is part of a trilogy. Are we going to see a trilogy from this, or it's a 2-part series? I remember your first one was on drugs. Was about drugs. Right.
Yeah. So that can't really be necessarily part of the trilogy.
No, that's The Hobbit.
Right. That's the Hobbit. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put a cap at it. Maybe there'll be even more, but it's up to your audience. If they buy the book, then publishers will let me continue to write books and publish them. So,
well, and that doesn't dictate what your subject's going to be, though. I'm not saying, I said trilogy insofar as like your last one was about, we've got People, which was about the birth of like the sort of this progressive resurgence within the Democratic Party. And then The Squad is about like, you know, the hiccups and the start of that, and you know, that was my point. But let's not.
No, exactly, and you know, the next one would, you know, continue to tell the story. But as you guys know from the world of streaming, they will cancel a show on a cliffhanger. You know, if they feel like it, they don't care.
Well, let's hope part 3 is like, you know, them actually, I don't know, one of them becoming president or something like that. Because I don't know how much more I can take of what's going on with Biden right now. It's a little rough to have him as the head of the Democratic Party at the moment.
Let's start with this clip of you. Actually, you were at the I don't know, is this at I guess at the White House in the press pool, State Department press pool, talking to State Department spokesperson Mark Miller about basically the broad question. South Africa is taking Israel to the International Court of Justice with charges of genocide. Emma interviewed a
human rights lawyer yesterday who's won in front of Francis Boyle. You may have seen I don't know, his recent appearance on Democracy Now! Where he said something similar, where he believes, based on his reading of the case put forward by South Africa, he says it's very well researched and thorough, and he believes that within the next week or so that Israel will be found to have been, or will lose their case, and that the United Nations may have to move forward with them having committed crimes of genocide.
I was on Democracy Now! Right after him, so I captively watched that interview. I had no choice, but it was a very good interview. Yeah,
well, he's
Emma
great.
did even better job yesterday.
No doubt she did.
All right, but let's look at your question of Miller.
And to follow up on Turkey, I'm sure you've seen Turkey has joined South Africa in its charging Israel with genocide before the International Court of Justice. Is there any concern within the State Department that State Department officials could be roped into this prosecution?
No, I will say that as it relates to the State Department, we have been committed to addressing the humanitarian situation in Gaza and have made a priority of preventing, as I just said in response to your question, the displacement of Palestinians. I will also say, though, that genocide is, of course, a heinous atrocity, one of the most heinous atrocities that any individual can commit. Those are allegations that should not be made lightly, and as it pertains to the United States, we are not seeing any acts that constitute genocide.
And finally, over the break, top authorities in the Armenian quarter expressed deep concern that the Israeli government was using the conflict in Gaza to push out a lot of Armenian Christians from the Armenian quarter. Any response?
So no specific response to that, but as we have said on a number of occasions, we do not want to see the government of Israel take any steps that would escalate tensions. Go ahead.
Now, I notice he doesn't follow up that with, and if we do, or now that we are, there's nothing else after that. It is, and, you know, it's quite clear that we have not exercised any leverage whatsoever. So we can't test the theory as to whether the U.S. could influence Israel with its, to actually not do the things that we supposedly want them not to do. Increasingly, it's harder to accept that we don't want them to do this really with any type of energy if we're not going to do anything about it.
And nor have they conducted, and this is, I think, your question sparked this political report. If I were to guess, Ryan, that the U.S. has not formally assessed if Israel is violating human rights. So that's an admission in Politico that even though they say they're not committing genocide, they've done zero formal review of it.
That's right. Yeah. That after that question, there were a number of other reporters who picked up on kind of some newsworthy nuggets that he dropped there, as that you pointed out, to follow up on. Well, wait a minute. You've determined that there's no act, so that means there was a process that led to a determination. Can you tell us about that process? And eventually it got to that point. But yeah, I thought his answer was interesting because it's like, okay, what's your culpability? What's your exposure in this war crimes prosecution? And the answer was, we have told them not, to take care of the humanitarian situation and to do everything you can to reduce civilian casualties. So, therefore, we are not exposed. That was basically his answer. But if you think about it in a more common sense kind of way, it's like, all right, somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, I'm going to go rob this 7-Eleven. Can I have a gun? You're like, you should not rob that 7-Eleven. That would be inappropriate. But yeah, here's the gun. Right. And then they go in, they rob the 7-Eleven, they shoot the clerk, they come back out, and they're like, I'm going to go rob another 7-Eleven, but I'm out of bullets. Like, well, I really think it's a bad idea to rob the second 7-Eleven. You should definitely not do that.
We don't want to see it.
And take care next time to just rob the till. You don't have to shoot the clerk. And they're like, I think we're going to shoot the clerk. So can I have some bullets? And you're like, here are some bullets, but do not do this. It's a really bad idea. We really would encourage you not to do this. And then they go in and rob the second 7-Eleven and kill that clerk too. It doesn't seem to me like if that person gets arrested, that the person would get off. Just sitting in the back seat of a car when you don't even know the guy is going to rob a 7-Eleven has people sitting in prison today. But actually handing them the bullets and the gun to do it, I don't think you get out of jail just by suggesting that they, act a little more responsibly if they keep coming back for more and continue to not act responsibly.
Do you think Miller's response that this is not something to be accused or making accusation lightly or frivolously, do you think that is the nascent effort to begin to delegitimize the result of this tribunal, I guess, case in the event that it does come back there is an attempted genocide going on, or a genocide, or ethnic cleansing, or something that is, sort of a substantial charge that I think sort of validates what people are seeing with their own eyes.
I think they're going to throw a lot against the wall between now and a verdict. And you're seeing Kirby do it a little differently. And I thought it was interesting, the daylight between Miller's response and later in the press briefing, Miller said, a reporter asked, well, what do you think of South Africa? Have you talked to them about, what do you think of the fact that they pursued these charges? And he said, well, we don't think it's a productive step. And left it at that. Kirby, meanwhile, is just furious. This is meritless. It's baseless. It's without any basis in fact. It's slanderous. He's doing the aggressive, full on rebuttal to it. So it feels like there's a lot of different kind of responses that are being tested out, but it is a real risk, as Emma, from your interview with Francis.
Certainly,
it's not a totally toothless.
I would argue. I would argue it's not totally. I mean, well, it's not totally toothless in terms of the culpability, right? As you say, I wish it had more teeth. But in terms of the cases being presented by South Africa, hundreds of footnotes. The case is laid out quite clearly. And when I spoke to Francis yesterday, he went through the different planks of what constitutes genocide in international law, and also use his experience in arguing on behalf of victims of genocide in order to frame the conversation, and said how Israel exceeds many of what he successfully argued in front of the ICJ in terms of their crimes in death tolls, in maiming, in stated intent, as well as the case that's being brought by South Africa is much more robust than what he said even he was able to present during his time, I think it was with Bosnia, in his case in front of the ICJ, because it has more people working on it, and the footnotes and the evidence and the stated intent by Israeli officials in public, blatantly, is so obvious that, like, we'll see how the process plays out, but the United States is in some scary territory here, and I think it really exemplifies the arrogance of kind of an old guard of people in the foreign policy apparatus that see the United States hegemonic role in the world as immutable and as unchanging because of like because of American might, and how they're really underestimating, I would say, how quickly the world is turning on the United States and Israel, even though it's borne out in just like the numbers in the United Nations.
Right. And where do they think that this goes afterwards? They keep talking about, the day after for Gaza. And from that perspective, it seems to be only the Israeli government that has a real plan for the day after for Gaza, a plan that the kind of U.S. policymakers keep pretending is not their plan. But what about the day after, for Israel? There was actually a piece on Haaretz this morning talking about how the Israeli public is living in a kind of fantasy land constructed by Channel 12 and the IDF propaganda that is keeping them from having any idea of what's actually going on the ground in Gaza, and also having any idea about what's going on in the rest of the world as it relates to public opinion about what Israel's doing. And so, and their argument is that at the day after, Israel's going to be extremely isolated and in a difficult geopolitical situation, which will be made worse when if there is an International Court of Justice verdict that people can point to, because the entire effort to undermine the BDS movement by calling it anti-Semitic and a double standard is really blown apart by a verdict that you could point to at the ICJ.
I think this is a point that people need to really understand. Gideon Levy, the sort of famed Israeli journalist, has said the same thing. He's said, like, the Israeli population has absolutely no idea what's going on in Gaza. They're completely in a moment, maybe we'll play this clip of that I saw on your Twitter feed of some students, essentially, I mean, not attacking their principal, but like chastising their principal for introducing the idea of what is going on in Gaza. But this is, I mean, people should understand this, and this is frankly something that I had predicted, I don't know, 10 years ago, that we're going to get to a point where Israel is going to become increasingly isolated. And Biden is, it seems to me, at least within the Democratic Party, but possibly across American politics, the high watermark in terms of completely unconditioned support for Israel. Mm-hmm. And it also seems unsustainable to me when the Biden administration had issued an assessment of the Russian war crimes within literally like 4 weeks, I think, of its invasion of Ukraine. And now 2 months into this, 3 months into this now, has made no assessment. They don't want to see what's there. Eventually this assessment is going to have to be made. It may be accelerated by this court case, but we are at the high watermark, it seems to me, of support for Israel. Mm-hmm. And there is no way that it is going to increase from here, because even if this was to end tomorrow, we're never going to get to this level where people can justify what's gone on more. But as we start to see what's under the rubble, as in the event that this becomes even more, involving Lebanon, or we assassinated somebody in Iraq, the attack in Syria, Israel's attack in Beirut. I mean, it can only get worse from Israel. But look at this. This is something you had posted. Yalla, I think, is the name of the principal.
Yeah.
And they are yelling, "Yalla, go home." This is a principal.
And like throwing stuff at her.
She was suspended for publishing a message in support of Gazan children. That's it. And then we can talk a little bit more about the media censorship there and social media repercussions. And here are the children yelling at her, "Go home," in this school.
You can see like a water balloon or something falls through. The kids see.
But all these kids are tormenting their principal for raising the specter of the over 10,000 now reportedly children in Gaza who have died. We had a caller the other day who said who's from the West Bank, who has a friend who's in Gaza, who's a doctor, who's saying that children are having heart attacks. Mm-hmm. Young children are having heart attacks because they're in such a state, they're not getting sleep, they're in such a state of fear that literally kids are now, cardiac arrest is a thing amongst children there. Let's talk about this dynamic, though, in Israel, when we talk about the bubble that the Israeli population is in. Because, again, the 80% of them, this is a rough number, 80% want Netanyahu gone. But only after that 80% want Gaza leveled. And it is much easier to maintain support for this type of thing where you don't have to witness the implications of it. But talk a little bit both about the censorship that is happening in terms of the media, and also that people don't understand this. You can get arrested for posting stuff on social media in Israel that is in any way sympathetic to Palestinians.
Yeah, I think it's there have been some serious censorship laws in place before October 7th, but after October 7th, they amended, I think it's Title 42 of the Israeli code that involves counterterrorism, that says that not just posting, but even consuming certain media is a criminal offense. Scrolling, landing on, let's say, like Hamas puts out a video of some like attack in, inside Gaza. But it's not just Hamas. Like the IDF is free to designate any other sources that they consider to be, supportive of terrorism, and so the definition is just extremely broad about, not just about what you're able to say, but what you're able to read. There was this harrowing video that came out in the early stages of this with an Israeli Arab woman getting confronted by police. Yeah. Because she had posted something like, may God protect them. And you can see in her face that immediately she realizes what's going on. And she's like, no. I'm talking about may God protect the Israeli soldiers who are... She's begging. Who are going into Gaza. Like, I am on your side. I'm an Israeli citizen. No. Like, but she can see her life flashing before her eyes, because if she gets pulled into this Kafkaesque kind of system, there may be no getting out of it, or she may spend years in it. When it seemed genuine and authentic, that like what she was saying was, may God protect the Israeli soldiers. Aside from all that, then it was her WhatsApp status message. Like, it wasn't even like a tweet.
Post.
It's like,
right.
Yeah. And so setting aside the fact of whether that, let's say she was talking about Palestinian civilians, may God protect them, like that actually would have been straight up criminal. Like, you could not say, "May God protect Palestinian civilians." People think about the fact that the principal was suspended from her job for posting sympathy for Palestinian children who were being killed, not for defending like the right to resist the oppressor or saying anything positive about any Palestinian militant or terrorist or anything like that, just for expressing sympathy for Palestinian children. She was suspended from her job, could have been arrested. And, there's a warning, you're oftentimes if you're a Jewish Israeli on your first offense, you're not going to go to prison for it, though you could. But there's if she continues to post sympathy for Palestinian children, that could happen. But then she comes back to school after the suspension and is just greeted with this, jeering mob of other children.
Which, I mean, there's two different stories there. One is I think people aren't aware of, and I think we played a clip from a Israeli history teacher who was on Democracy Now! I think maybe about a month ago.
Yeah.
He was arrested and interrogated multiple times. His name was Meir Baruchen. After he posted a message on Facebook about his opposition to the killing of innocent Palestinian civilians. And so you have this chilling effect where you get arrested if you do, even if you say, I don't think we should be killing people. And then to look at the mob of children who have obviously been sort of like marinated in this culture that is in this bubble where the idea that their teacher expressed sympathy for Palestinian children was enough to get her sort of booed and water ballooned and whatnot. I mean, what they did, this is a grown woman, she can handle it, but it is indicative of what is going on and just how sort of like isolated the Israeli population is. I think it remains to be seen whether they will ever really get a full gist of what's going on there and whether that would make a difference. Frankly, I don't know. But it ain't going to get any better. Let's put it that way. It really is astonishing. And the Biden administration, it seems to me, has no interest. I mean, they can say, well, we've got to be this way with Netanyahu because look at who's in his administration. Netanyahu's the best that we're going to find in that government. And look at the Israeli population. But there is a part of the reason why the Israeli population is not questioning any of this is because the president of the United States, and this is not the typical response of the president of the United States, is not giving any indication that there's any problem whatsoever. And if Joe Biden was out there calling for a ceasefire, if Joe Biden was out there saying, we're not going to do aid because they're not listening to me, the Israeli population, it would start to mean something to the Israeli population. That's the way it used to work in the previous decades.
And speech and press laws can have a major effect. Like that's a reason that governments, institute them. For a lot of people, because the laws are in place now, they're not seeing images of Palestinian children being blown up. They're just not seeing them. They're not hearing that their neighbors have some creeping doubts about what the Israeli government is doing. And so it becomes very easy then, if you took the climate in America of post 9/11, where everybody was self-censoring already because they were in absolute bloodlust and rage, and then you layered on top of that a propaganda law that said you are only allowed to support war, then it would have the period of time where we were in this like red hot rage would have, we would have been in a red hotter rage, and it would have lasted longer.
Yep.
And you're
100%.
I just want to point out too, The Intercept had a great piece yesterday. I believe it was written by Daniel Boguslaw about CNN in the United States. And the Middle Eastern, when reporting is coming out of the Middle East covering this conflict in particular, it also goes through the Israeli government censors.
Right. Yes. So right, what he discovered is, and there's some internal dissent about this practice inside of CNN, that that they insist that all reporting about the war be routed through the Jerusalem Bureau, which does then implicate the IDF censor. But it also, as all news organizations work this way, the Jerusalem Bureau, those reporters are going to be closest to the Israeli government. That's how that type of access journalism works. And so there's going to be a certain lens that is then applied to pieces that are then pushed through there, even before you get to the IDF censor.
I want to make this. I want to make this explicit for people so they understand this dynamic. By routing these stories through the Jerusalem Bureau, putting aside any contact they have in that moment with the Israeli government, their careers, their ability to do their work is based upon relationships that they've made in Israel. If it is known outside of the CNN structure that the Jerusalem Bureau has veto power on stories that get on CNN, that is a problem for them, theoretically, with the Israeli officials that they want to get information from. It may also be an advantage to them that they can get more information from, but they have to deliver the veto on some things, and it's highly problematic, it seems to me. But of all the networks, that doesn't surprise me, based upon Wolf Blitzer's history and some of Jake Tapper's perspective on this. But all right, be that as it may, let's talk a little bit about there's a real danger that this is going to widen. We've been talking about this for a couple months, and we're seeing stuff like engagement with the Houthis, assassinations or killings in Syria and in Iraq, and Israeli drone strikes in Beirut. It really does feel like Israel would love to have a conflict with Lebanon at this point, because Netanyahu wants this to go on forever. But how could Biden, from a political standpoint, and it seems like he's just literally like hell-bent, like there's nothing besides trains, nothing's more important to him than doing whatever Israel says. But at one point, doesn't someone say, this is going to politically cost you? And because it clearly is going to cost. It's just a question of how much. And what is going on there? Do you have any sense? Are people starting to freak out about this? They are inside the State Department, inside the White House. It feels to people that it's just ideological for Biden at this point, that he's willing to continue down this path despite the clear political costs that it has to him, despite the fact that it is his political opponents. Netanyahu would like nothing more than to see Biden lose.
Yep.
That are dealing him these costs, but also Netanyahu, I think, should be careful what he wishes for. There's nobody more cynical in politics than Trump. Like Trump is not doing a damn thing for Israel that hurts him, or Trump's not doing anything for anybody. Israel's not special in that case. If he thinks it would remotely cost him politically, the second that Israel becomes anything of a drag to him, he would pivot and dump them as quickly as he aligned with them. If he thought it was politically advantageous to have Kim Jong-un as his vice president, he'd do it. He absolutely just does not care about anything.
Right. And so the point being that despite the fact that at one point, I think the Abraham Accords, I think moving the embassy to Jerusalem, these were all basically table settings to allow the Israelis to have this type of hubris, frankly.
Right.
And to expect...
Which got us where we are.
Without a doubt, in my mind. But if Trump saw numbers that suggested, and right now I think it's like 49% of Republicans are saying ceasefire, they are probably the softest Trump supporters in the Republican Party. But if that was to flip, he would call for a ceasefire tomorrow. And
I wouldn't put it past him to be like, I'll fix this problem. I'll end this war.
Right. Well, all right, but let's talk about. I mean, it's just Biden. They are planning to impeach maybe Mayorkas. In a couple of weeks, they're going to have 2 votes to waste. Once, like, McCarthy's gone, and I can't remember who the other one was going to become president of. I can't remember who it is, but he's gone in like, I think, a week and a half. They're going to have 2 votes to waste. They're going to have a 3-vote margin. Tie gets you nowhere in the House. There's no tie-breaking situation. And by mid-February, there's going to be an election for George Santos's seat. And that could swing towards the Democrats. Swazi could win there. What are they going to do when they go down the road to impeach Biden, and then they can't even impeach him in the House? Like, what's Mark Molinaro going to vote for? What's what's his face from California? There's a couple of Republicans who it seems can't afford to go down there. And now the more they investigate, the more dirt they find on Trump.
Right. Yeah. It's, they're a very day at a time caucus. So they will cross that bridge, if and when they get to it. You saw how that worked out for Kevin McCarthy. Like, his whole strategy for becoming speaker and staying speaker was a day at a time. And he made it 9 months or something like that. And so he gets a Wikipedia page for speakers of the House, and he can take that kind of that oak thing with his name etched in it and put it on his wall. But that's it. They don't seem to have a strategy. But if the impeachment is to try to make Steve Bannon and his base happy, they can put it on the floor. The moderate Republicans can vote against it. Steve Bannon can then be angry at the moderate Republicans. But Steve Bannon is also pretty savvy, and so he'll eventually tell his crowd to move on to something else, because what's the point of wasting all of your time going after these Republicans who are now running in swing districts? They'll find something else shiny to go after. So yeah, I think it's just a day at a time thing, and maybe you punt the impeachment vote as far as you can and hope that people forget about it. Like, their strategy seems to be just surviving and hoping people forget about what they promised.
Is Mike Johnson right now preparing to do something that he hopes people forget about in terms of like the continuing resolution? I mean, this is the other thing that's coming up.
He's also going to have a bad government spending deal to try to get through, because he's negotiating with Schumer, and some of this was already baked in. Freedom Caucus is going to be mad about whatever deal they come up with. Now they want to shut the government down over the border, and so none of it ever ends well for Republicans, and always ends with a stain on whoever the Republican speaker's face is. And so he's got to give, in that context, he's got to give them something. So I was like, all right, here's your Mayorkas and Biden impeachment votes. Take these, because he doesn't have anything to give them for the most part. Like that's within his power to do, other than shutdowns and impeachment votes.
Is Schumer not giving him a bunch of stuff on immigration? I mean, it feels like the Democrats are going in and getting ready to, give away a lot of stuff in terms of like immigrants and sort of, provide more draconian border policies or whatnot. I mean, do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, and Johnson is saying that he's going to also try to negotiate directly with the White House over this. But it's a real, don't throw me in the briar patch situation, I think, for Democrats who are just, they don't have any ideological commitment to like decent immigration policies. It's, the situation at the border is causing them political harm. They're losing share with Hispanics, even as, Trump is the head of the Republican Party. So they are kind of abandoning their whole kind of soft on immigration rhetoric that they've adopted over the last 5-6 years. So I think they actually are happy to have Republicans force their hand and do some type of crackdown at the border.
That means that Fox News will never call Biden soft on immigration again.
Yes, exactly.
And problem solved.
Right, yeah. As long as the objective conditions change, then of course. Then
it's just crazy because this is, honestly, this is a really old trap that Democrats fell into with something like abortion too, where we're not even going to say the word. Like, let's not say the word. And how does that work out? You leave a vacuum and the right completely dominates the conversation. And you see polling numbers, we've covered this on the show, when you ask questions about immigration, there's general confusion about what our policy even is and what a path forward would be. And that's directly the result of Democrats basically leaving the entire conversation to the Republicans to frame it in a certain way. And instead of thinking in a more structural, forward-thinking way, the Biden administration is just caving to what that framing is. And he will get 0 political points for it. 0, none.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. But they also don't care. They're like Democrats are fine with cracking down on the border, I think.
Yeah.
But just speaking out as a political matter, if they're out there, they're going to get caught with this Mayorkas impeachment, aren't they? Because if they're out there saying, yes, we need to crack down more on the border, well, then who do you blame for that? Right?
Well,
you got to blame Mayorkas. Like, how many votes are the Republicans going to get to impeach Mayorkas? Maybe the issue of there being only a 2-person majority for the Republicans or a 3-person majority for Republicans is not going to be an issue, because if the Democrats are going to, if they're going to cave on this, that means that they're not going to be able to provide any type of sort of, never mind direct defense from Mayorkas. They're not going to be able to put out any ideas in which to make the Mayorkas impeachment look like, some type of fanatical craziness by the Republicans. Some of them are going to have to vote for it.
Well, the idea that they can put forward, I don't think any of them will. We'll see. The idea that they can put forward is that the laws haven't been updated since the 1980s. The laws are broken. It's not Mayorkas' fault that Congress has refused to give him a rational immigration system to execute, to implement. And then that'll be the justification for some crackdowns and some new laws that they may or may not get through, because the Republicans also have no interest in solving the situation. Like,
right.
They would rather it stay in the news, and you have constant video of people coming across the border, and you have Democratic mayors complaining publicly about the migrant crisis, refugee crisis in their cities. Like, they don't have any incentive, like, to actually make the world better, particularly if there's a Democrat in the White House. Like, to them, they'd rather have the crisis. So that's why I think it might not happen.
Interesting. We'll see, I guess. All right. One more thing I want to talk to you about. You've been covering this story of Imran Khan in Pakistan. Do we have that clip? Yeah. Let's play this clip.
Wait for the end. You guys are going to love it.
Okay. And folks should go. I think you interviewed Imran Khan in November, was it?
I think June for Deconstructed and Counterpoints. Yeah.
June? Oh God.
Yeah, because he was in jail by July or August.
Right, and you hadn't interviewed him after that. Oh my God,
right.
That was a long time ago. It felt like it was a month ago. I like to be 1 month behind, and I didn't realize I was 6. But here you are again. Is this that same day where you were at the State Department, or this different day?
Different day.
Okay. Matt Miller again on the
different tie.
Different tie.
Ooh.
Ryan, go ahead.
Follow up quickly on the question earlier about the Pakistani election.
Yeah.
You said it is for the Pakistani people to choose their government, and not only, as he mentioned, is the former prime minister in jail at the time, but you're also seeing something rather extraordinary where members of his party who are filing to run for office, and there's a lot of video evidence from around the country that you may have seen this, they're filing to run for office and they're being arrested and abducted at the filing office. They're also arresting the quote unquote approvers, people who signed their petitions as well. So you're not going to have any candidates for the people to choose from. So how can Pakistani people choose their government if there's nobody to choose from on the ballot? And is this something that is concerning?
So I will say, without commenting on that, the specific matters, we want to see free and fair elections that are conducted in accordance with Pakistan's laws. It's not for the United States to dictate to Pakistan how it conducts the exact specifics of how it conducts its election, but to make clear that we want to see those elections conducted in a free, fair, and peaceful manner that includes freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, and ultimately a full, open, reliable, vibrant democratic process.
But it feels like election rigging of this level would merit sanctions if a Maduro-like government did something like this. It would seem like the State Department might come down a little harder. This is 250 million person democracy.
And we will continue to support democratic expression and vibrant democracy in Pakistan, but I don't have anything to preview from here.
You said you will continue to support democratic suppression.
I said expression.
Oh,
expression.
You didn't, but...
Well, also, what is democratic expression? Like,
I mean,
I sort of get that, but I've never. Earlier he said freedom of expression, but democratic expression. I know what democratic suppression is.
Democratic expression is aspirational.
Aspirational,
and they want people to really want democracy there.
It's expressing the idea of democracy by having a thing that they call an election, even if there aren't candidates on the ballot. But you go and you check a box.
It really feels like Joe Biden's foreign policy, and this was supposedly his thing, right? I mean, this is why Obama chose him. He had been on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for like 50 years or something. That's an exaggeration, but not a huge one.
But not much.
And it really feels like that the U.S. is completely rudderless here. I mean, do you get that sense? I mean, we're not we have no stake in what's happening in Pakistan. Like this is
unfortunately there was a rudder in Pakistan, and as we reported, like the U.S. Urged the military to oust Imran Khan because Imran Khan was neutral in the Ukraine-Russia war, and now that the military-backed regime is in there, Pakistan is helping make munitions and for the Ukrainians, and is otherwise pliant towards U.S. interests as it relates to China, India, and Russia, and so we actually do have a rudder going there. It just doesn't match our kind of rhetoric around belief in democracy, and it's really shocking to think about a country of that size, like 250 million people, which at times had military dictatorships, other times the democratic institutions pushed back through. Had GDP growth, significant GDP growth under Khan. Now it's just an absolute economic basket case. And they're, like I said, literally arresting down ballot candidates as they show up to file for office and not even charging them with anything. And Miller clearly, and the State Department clearly feels zero pressure because he's like, well, who are we to dictate, exactly how you run an election, as long as you have an election. Like that would just never fly from any country that wasn't doing 100% of the other bidding of the United States. Like they not letting people on the ballot and abducting them and not even charging them. Because one thing if like all of these candidates happen to be criminals that showed up, but you're not even charging them with anything.
It really maybe it's just a function of our news and having social media, but in my lifetime I don't remember such a naked sort of like we've got two books. And when we talk about this, we'll read from this book. When we talk about that, we'll read from this book. I mean, it really is like, again, when it came to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we had the war crimes assessment done within 3 or 4 weeks. With Israel, it may take, who knows? It could take 6 months. It could take 9 months. Don't want to rush judgment. We don't have the resources to do this type of investigation. They can have a top intelligence person leak without evidence that we know there was a command center with hostages there under a hospital, but we can't really make the assessment of the 2,000 bombs, the 202,000-pound bombs that were dropped in the supposed safe zone. It really is astonishing. Very bold.
It's getting really dark. Yeah.
Well, Ryan, at least we got to see your tie.
I knew it. I knew it. I was waiting. Waiting.
It's a big, thick one. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if
the tie was wider, so that's okay, right?
That kind of paisley. I don't know if that's. I mean, that's paisley. Nice if you're going to a very fancy dinner, but I don't know that that's one I would have worn there in that situation.
I'm going back to the Jerry Garcia ties. If I'm going to get grief for it, I'm just going all the way back.
Jerry Garcia ties will at least, like, you come in there and be the Jerry Garcia type of rep, but like you're wearing ties that, like, honestly, you'd wear to a wedding.
That is a wedding tie.
Fancy wedding.
Yeah.
What's a Jerry Garcia tie? I've only seen him ever in like tie dye. I mean,
he did the
whole line of ties.
The whole line of ties because he would do like artwork. I mean, he was a good artist.
Huh.
He was. Yeah. Yeah. Check him out. You'll like him.
Okay.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
Yes, that's what it means.
Ryan Grimm, always a pleasure. Your book, The Squad, AOC and the Hope of a Political Revolution, is really interesting. There's a lot of sort of like inside, it's not that inside baseball, but there's a lot of reporting to understand the dynamics that are going on. If you really want to understand sort of the constraints, the limitations of like the progressive wing of the party. Your book, both these books, but particularly this next one in terms of like the interplay between AOC and Pelosi and whatnot, really interesting. And we should say,
thank you.
It gives you the groundwork to understand in some respects, like, Bernie came out 2 days ago, was it? 3 days ago, saying no more aid to Israel. Warren came out and said conditional aid to Israel. I don't know how much of an impact this is going to have, but it very well may influence things in the Senate if this starts to roll more. It's been interesting that the delay on this funding for Israel is working against them in this instance. Yeah. Which is not to say that they're not getting emergency funding and they don't have an open door to weaponry in Israel. But at the very least, from a political standpoint, maybe that permeates the bubble in Israel. I don't know. Ryan Grimm, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
You got it.
Thanks, Ryan.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
All right, folks. Let's see. Ryan Grimm's tie. Remind the chat how I got into remind the chat how I got into a physical altercation with Jesse Waters over him mistreating my coworker.
So righteous.
Yep.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
Exactly.
There you go. Leaning heavily on that, but that's worth it.
It's my favorite one.
I know it is.
I don't even remember the context of that one.
It was Josh Hawley at a don't masturbate.
Yes.
Have kids conference.
Yes.
Let's head into the fun half.
Let's.
Folks, you can join us in the fun half if you want by becoming a member. It is your support that makes this show possible. Join themajorityreport.com. We're going to do some type of we got to get our membership up soon. So I don't know what we're going to do, but if you have the ability to become a member, please join themajorityreport.com. It is your support that really helps us in the ebbs and flows of advertising and all the different things. Our membership is what makes the show what it is. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, featuring the Majority Report blend. I don't know if they're featuring it, but they do feature it. Like, I don't like they have a bunch of other coffees, but from my perspective, they feature it. Justcoffee.coop. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off your coffee. Very reasonably priced, great co-op. They're a serious movement partner. Justcoffee.coop. Emma, ESVN.
Well, on ESPN, we talked about the college football semifinals, the preview for the championship, which is quite a fun one. Michael Penix. We also talked about David Tepper, now immediately becoming the worst NFL owner in just like 5 years or so, throwing a drink on a fan. Lamar Jackson for MVP, youtube.com/ESPN show for more of that.
Can I just, David Copperfield wrote, need to get your members up, get a Blue Chew sponsorship.
Oh, God, that's like every sports podcast I listen to has a frickin' Blue Chew in it.
I bought my dad a membership for Christmas, but sent it to an old inactive email. Who do I message to fix that? Left is best, says Fart Twain. I think if you go to the Zendesk on majority.fm, that will help. They'll get on that.
Okay.
Is that from you?
I don't know. I don't really know what you're talking about, to be honest with you.
But why'd you say okay?
I'm just.
You okay?
Yeah, I don't know.
You just looked at me and said okay, as if you.
Do you ever watch something?
I spaced out. I don't know what to tell you.
When you watch a TV show with your significant other and they're falling asleep but don't want to not you to know, so they react to something just randomly that's on the show.
Were you just falling asleep?
No.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm talking to you, Emma.
So, I mean, look, sometimes I just glaze over slightly when you're talking.
Go to the Zendesk, Emma. Emma was at her own Zendesk.
Text Bernie, bro. Are my IMs even coming through? Apparently. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Oh, yeah, Left Reckoning, we had Emma on to talk about Fetterman and Gaza.
Okay. You pull that. You gotta pull it.
I'm mad you caught that. Damn it.
Go to the Zendesk. Pay up your membership. And Griscom and I will have something for folks this weekend. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
I've not been sleeping that well.
Let's go to the fun app. 646-257-3920 is the number.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on?
It's nuts.
Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone? Nomi Key.
You did it.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's.
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this
7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you?
No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid though. Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge met.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35. 501. 1 half. 3 8s.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
We are back. Emma Vigeland, Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Couple IMs. Adam, Marin, cucks Sam again. David Cross hosted Marin on his podcast before Sam. He's not going to get to me for a long time. It's got to be all show busy. Tim from L.A., pro-Israel, anti-ceasefire, Congressman Brad Sherman, California 32, now as challenger, Chris Ahuja, and he supports ceasefire. Please check out his campaign if you haven't already. Man Shovel, our IMs do indeed come through, but usually when I post nonsense, my comment doesn't get read. I think it's because Sam is genuinely looking out for my best interest and not because he doesn't want to waste his time reading my asinine comments. Emma, on the other hand, just lets it all of my bad comments I get on air. In all honesty, I don't.
There's not much more rhyme or reason.
I don't preview anything.
Yeah. Me neither.
John from Co. At what point does the "Are my IMs even going through" IM become a trope? LOL. Matt, I guess. Hey, I hope you guys are probably get most money out of memberships, but it might be worth noting that if folks have Amazon Prime, they can get a Majority Report, a free sub. You already gave Bezos the money, might as well direct it. Oh yeah, this is on Twitch. We don't say this enough. But if you have an Amazon Prime membership and you're watching us on Twitch, you can designate a certain, I don't know, like you get a free subscription, essentially, free to you. But if you designate us the designee of that subscription, we get, I don't know, $1,
couple bucks a month.
Couple of bucks a month.
Nice.
So poggers on that one.
That would otherwise go to like crushing the Amazon union or something.
Yeah.
Truly flops. Emma reacting like me when my boss calls on me during a team meeting and I clearly haven't been paying attention gave me a good laugh.
A little bit.
All right.
I can't wait to go back and rewatch that.
The thing about this job is that we're being recorded. So
That's right.
That's one of the facts of this.
Very often we're being recorded.
So that will be there for everybody.
Yep. It's like you're taking lessons from like Mila.
Oh yeah.
She's and that happens with her all the time.
Right.
I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, what do you mean? I'm like, what did you just said? Okay.
Yeah, there's certain
She's like,
responses.
Dad, I can't. I'm trying to focus on my phone.
Yeah,
there's
that's
certain responses
what it
that
is.
work for generic, like 100%, you can say.
Oh yeah.
Without really like knowing what even people are responding to, but there's certain contexts where you don't really like.
Yep.
Especially if you're not being addressed, it seems weird.
And I'm too uptight not to let something like that pass in any context. I need to know exactly what was meant by that and then realize that I'm not being paid attention to whatsoever. All right. With that said, hey.
Free speech warrior Dave Rubin.
Dave Rubin is still around. Remember, free speech, the most important thing. We've got to fight censorship. And cancel culture is ruining the country. Or not.
New York Representative Elise Stefanik, who is the one that was doing the questioning during that congressional hearing, she was on Fox yesterday talking about how they are not going to stop pushing on this stuff.
This congressional investigation is not going to stop because of the resignation of these university presidents. There are deep institutional rots in these formerly prestigious universities, whether it's their DEI offices or whether it's their anti-Semitism that we see raging on college campuses. So I think the investigation is going to uncover much, much more. This is just, about the university president on top of the institution, but it's an institutional rot that we are addressing because these colleges get billions of taxpayer dollars. And I believe as we continue our congressional investigation that we will uncover what will be the greatest scandal in higher education because the Harvard Corporation members themselves are complicit in this cover-up of her plagiarism and, again, most importantly, their failure to protect Jewish students on campus.
All right, that's the right spirit. Again, you get a win, and now you keep going. What's really going on at Harvard? How much discrimination against Jewish students, Asian students, white students have they been doing over the years? Did they get a whole bunch of
pause it now. Wait a second.
professors?
So the DEI program is to discriminate against Jewish, Asian, and white students. Interesting.
You should almost have like a diversity, equity, inclusion that makes sure Asian, white, and Jewish students don't get discriminated
Right.
against.
It's very strange. It really is shaping, but I like how Stefanik has sort of like expanded, right? It was anti-Semitism that she was attacking these college presidents for. And now because the college president gets caught up in a plagiarism scandal, which was the rules about plagiarism within the academic world are very specific. They even change between disciplines. Historians will say one thing. The political scientists who looked at her documents said a different thing.
Harvard will have its own standards that may differ as well. I mean, I think that's what was at issue, if I'm not mistaken, with her.
It honestly depends on what discipline it is. People say that Gorsuch also had some issues along those lines. Even that Bill Ackman's, who was one of the guys pushing on this, his wife had a similar dynamic in her thesis that she wrote. I'm not going to weigh in on that because I don't know enough about the idiosyncrasies of plagiarism. But the idea that it just coincidentally, all these DEI things are just ways in which to elevate Black people is an interesting sort of like development that they're sort of shaping around here, says Dave Rubin. And it's weird that he's not saying where do LGBTQ people fit into these DEI things? I don't know if he's going to touch about that.
Yeah.
Discrimination against Jewish students, Asian students, white students have they been doing over the years? Did they get a whole bunch of professors who were not qualified, who were plagiarizing, and a whole bunch more, who had all sorts of awful ideas related to Marxism and communism and wokeism and everything else? Did they all rise up the ranks while they took good professors out? Did all of those things happen? Probably
not.
Well, she's
that's
a black
his whole.
woman.
That's his
all the
whole
evidence you need.
video. It's all he's doing. He's mailing it in these days.
He's really mailing it in.
The kids are probably pulling him down.
So, what is it though? Did she have awful ideas like Marxism, or was she plagiarizing? Because I am looking.
Black.
Yeah, she's black. I'm looking at the description for his book called "Don't Burn This Book," which is about censorship. The progressive woke machine, from outrage mobs and online censorship to activists masquerading as journalists, is waging a war against the last free thinkers in the world. This book is becoming is both explanation of the current blah blah blah. But the point is just that the outrage mob, that's you guys. That's you guys at this point who have moved from like, oh, she didn't say the right thing to Stefanik and she would use legalese when talking about phrases like from the river to the sea, to now it's really about how she was being shielded from her horrific plagiarism in her short tenure as Harvard president because she's a black woman and DEI protects everybody. And then also she was promoting bad ideas like Marxism. Is it about which is hilarious, but like, is it about what she believes, which they will say on one side
diversity of
their
ideas,
mouth, right? Or is it about the plagiarism? Pick one lane, but like, you can't really continue to go back to the testimony in front of Stefanik and then also say things like Marxism and say you're still a free speech warrior, because in those two examples, that's about speech that you don't like, that you're saying she should be punished for and out of her position for. They're such incredible hypocrites.
Yeah, well, I mean, hypocrisy. What are you going to do about that? Now, what is also amazing, and someone just I am this too, raises a good point. It has been so long since we had a president of a prestigious college lose their position because of a academic, I mean this like literally, an academic violation, on their thesis. You never hear of something like this happen because it never, ever, ever happens. Except for, of course, it happened 6 or 7 months ago, and no one ever even said a word about it. This is, and okay, we just leave that headline there before you slide down. Don't log in, and make sure you just show the headline, because I wonder if this has something to do with the dynamic. You ready for this? Stanford president will resign after report found flaws in research. And I don't want to give it away. His research. Scroll up. We'll see a picture of this president. Why didn't we hear anything about this? Oh, well, that's weird. That is weird. Where's the DEI in this? Or this is a result of the DEI.
It must be.
See, the DEI agenda works two ways. Mm-hmm. One, it puts people who are unqualified in the presidency, mm-hmm. but then it also takes out people who are unqualified in the presidency. But if they're white.
Who's the current Stanford president? Richard Soller. Is he? Oh, he's a white guy too.
And this wasn't a citation error or like, she paraphrased instead of quoted when she should have, even though she cited it, that type of thing, whatever. It turns out that he falsified data in an Alzheimer's study.
Oh.
Hey, at least it's not woke.
At least it's not woke. I mean, finally, where were the hearings that we had on this? I mean, it's just absurd. It's just absurd.
I mean, that's what we said yesterday. Is like, it's so obviously a category error that this has been put towards the top of the docket in terms of political discussion in this country. Like,
there's a whole tab on the New York Times homepage about clogging gay. Like, what are we doing here? And then Chris Rufo does an interview with Politico 2 days ago where he's just like, yeah, it was a smear job. It was a hit piece. I did it because of this.
It happened in October because of all the things we're going through right now with protests and that.
Yep. Let's get to, speaking of falsifying scientific data. Earlier in the program, let's do the other one. Earlier in the program, we started off with a clip of the Florida Surgeon General who is saying that he's trying to get rid of the, or calling for basically halts on the COVID vaccine because it is, I had the quote here somewhere, the Antichrist, or probably the Antichrist of vaccines. And God doesn't want you messing with the human genome. And therefore, my scientific opinion is that the COVID vaccines don't work. Here is Jimmy Dore I'm sorry. I got the vaccine booster, and so obviously I have a cognitive dysfunction. Talking about from the Daily Skeptic, which is some vax denying site that he's decided is real news, written by Will Jones. I wonder if that's actually like a
AI.
Yeah, exactly. Will Jones. I mean, it could be. I can't imagine someone would come up with that. Lancet study on COVID vaccine autopsies finds 74% were caused by vaccine. Study is removed within 24 hours. Now, you're not quite clear like who these autopsies are from this, but they were ostensibly people who supposedly died from the vaccine. So that's the universe of people. And this study supposedly finds that 74% of those people were caused by the vaccine. And let's listen to, I don't know if we should force you to listen to the 4 minutes that Jimmy Dore reads the entire article as
he works out in his brain.
Yes, he reads the entire article, and of course, he doesn't really know where the important parts are. So it's as if he's reading like a children's story half the time.
He's reading the method section, thinking it's like the conclusion section.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But go ahead here.
Listen to this. Lancet study on COVID vaccine autopsies finds 74% were caused by the vaccine. That got published at the Lancet, and they immediately removed it 24 hours later. Let me just break it down, and then we'll come to you for your comment. A Lancet review of 325 autopsies after COVID vaccination found that 74% of the deaths were caused by the vaccine, but the study was removed within 24 hours.
Pause it for one here. Now, I just want you to just ask yourself a question. And now, Jimmy has absolutely no curiosity about this. And the site that is reporting this, what 325 autopsies? Like, how did they decide these 325 autopsies? Is it they just randomly chose the autopsies around the world and they found that 74% of the people died from vaccines? That's not relevant here, because if, let's say it was 100% of these autopsies, which were the entire universe of autopsies that found that these people died of an adverse reaction to the COVID vaccine.
Right.
Of the hundreds of millions of people who got hundreds of millions of COVID vaccines, if 325 died, as opposed to, let's say, the 7 million that died from COVID, but we don't know, because this paper, which was a preprint awaiting peer review, so it was not a peer-reviewed paper, was taken down from the Lancet. Now, why? What is the process at the Lancet where they're just like, well, we always just publish stuff, and then we just realize, wait, this doesn't say something we want it to say.
Yeah.
It's maybe they all of a sudden realize, like, oh, wait, there's a problem with this study.
No.
So glaring. But no, it couldn't be it.
It couldn't be that.
Let's go.
Preprint was awaiting peer review. It was written by the leading cardiologist, Dr. Peter McCullough, a Yale epidemiologist, Dr. Harvey Risch.
Pause it for 1 second. I like how he says Yale epidemiologist, because Yale is valid when you want to hear from that guy.
That's exactly what I said earlier.
Exactly.
They're obsessed with credentialism when it's, or they eschew it altogether when it's the general scientific consensus and people that have worked and dedicated their lives and epidemiologists to understanding this. But when they can find their one crank who has an association with an Ivy League school or something like that, they'll blast that to the high heavens.
Yeah, I mean, and he says, or the Daily Skeptic says, a Lancet review found actually, the review isn't a study published in the Lancet, as some social media users claim, but a preprint that was uploaded to a server associated with the journal. It wasn't peer-reviewed or published in any scientific journal and was actually removed from the server by the journal because they're like, oh, this is some bullshit.
Okay, so it was never in the Lancet. Now, just to tell you something about Harvey Risch. He is a Yale emeritus. He is emeritus professor at Yale. And I suspect part of that reason is because of his time at Yale involving hydroxychloroquine. This is something that was put out by the Yale faculty. Now, so we're going to say Yale in the same way that he says Yale epidemiologist. We write with grave concern that too many are being distracted by the ardent advocacy of our Yale colleague, Dr. Harvey Risch, to promote the assertion that hydroxychloroquine, when given with antibiotics, is effective in treating COVID-19, in particular as early therapeutic intervention for the disease. As his colleagues, we defend the right of Dr. Risch, a respected cancer epidemiologist, his opinions, but he's not an expert in infectious disease epidemiology, and he has not been swayed by the body of scientific evidence from rigorously conducted clinical trials which refute the plausibility of his belief and arguments. Over the last few weeks, all of us had spent considerable time explaining the evidence behind HCQ research as it applies to late-stage COVID-19, et cetera, et cetera. We're seriously alarmed for the safety of patients and the coherence and effectiveness of our national COVID emergency response when misinformation about hydroxychloroquine, HCQ, they say, and I tried to say the whole word, is spread when rigorous scientific evidence and consensus produced by the community of expert researchers in infectious diseases, federal agencies, and national global health organizations not heeded. Let us be clear. We are unanimous in our desire to see the development of therapies to treat COVID-19 and prevent transmission. If HCQ was shown to be effective, even among subgroup patients with COVID-19 in ongoing high-quality trials, we would join our colleagues in promoting access to it for all who need it. And then we should say that this guy, Yale, epidemiologist, cancer epidemiologist, not infectious disease epidemiologist, Dr. Harvey Risch, had a paper that was listed on the national NLM. This is another database that is just a database that you can upload. Wrote back in around this time in May, this journal published an opinion piece by one of the members of the editorial board, Dr. Harvey Risch, that reviewed several papers and argued that using hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin early to treat symptomatic COVID-19 cases in high-risk patients should be broadly upheld. As members of this journal's editorial board, we are strongly supportive of open debate in science. However, we must also be thorough in our examination of the facts and open to changing our minds when new information arises. In this commentary, we document several important errors in the manuscript by Dr. Risch. Review the literature he presented and demonstrate why it is not of sufficient quality to support the scale-up of HCQ. So this one of the guys, essentially, who is no longer at Yale because of his shoddy work, writes this thing, pretends that it was in the Lancet. And we should say today, this headline, and again, I'm going to be very specific. This is just an analysis by French researchers. But they found that nearly 17,000 people across 6 countries, this is just there needs to be more research on this. 17,000 people across 6 countries may have died because they took hydroxychloroquine during the first wave of COVID-19 in 2020. This is a new analysis published by French researchers. In February and March, the use of this treatment was widely promoted based on preliminary reports suggesting a potential efficacy against COVID-19. Subsequent studies showed that not only did the drug have no benefit, it resulted in significant increase of death. The researchers from Lyon, France, and Quebec, Canada, obviously huge, Pfizer
totally.
Provided still prescribed hydroxychloroquine to some patients hospitalized with COVID-19, despite the absence of evidence documenting its clinical benefits. The analysis found an estimated 16,990 excess deaths across 6 countries, Turkey, Belgium, France, Spain, Italy, and the U.S., were likely attributed to hydroxychloroquine use. Researchers analyzed other studies that tracked hospitalizations, exposure to hydroxychloroquine, and the relative risk of death from the drug. You know what? Ironically, it was cardiac side effects. That if you had any type of pre-existing condition with the hydroxychloroquine. Now, we don't know, but the point being
yes,
that, no, let's listen to some of this BS and then we'll get out of it. I mean, he just reads it like it's a storybook. This is his job now. This is how he drives his
it's like doing a book report.
Yeah.
Colleagues at the Wellness Company and was published online on Wednesday on a preprint site on the prestigious medical journal. However, less than 24 hours later, the study was removed, and a note appeared stating that this preprint has been removed by preprints with The Lancet because the study's conclusions are not supported by the study methodology. While the study had not undergone any part of the peer review process, the note implies that it fell foul of the screening criteria. The original study abstract can be found at the Internet Archive, and it reads, "The rapid development and widespread deployment of COVID-19 vaccines, combined with the high number of adverse event reports, have led to concerns over possible mechanisms of injury, including systemic lipid nanoparticles, NLP, and mRNA distribution, spike protein-associated tissue damage, thrombogenicity, immune system dysfunction, and carcinogenicity." The aim of the systemic review is to investigate possible causal links between the COVID-19 vaccine administration and death using autopsies and post-mortem analysis.
His viewers can't read.
Here's the method that you used. We searched for all published autopsy and necropsy reports relating to COVID-19 vaccinations up until May 18th of 2023. We initially identified 678 studies, and after screening for our inclusion criteria, included 44 papers that contained 325 autopsy cases.
None of this says anything.
Yeah.
All they're saying is we looked for autopsy reports and we came up with some screening things. We're not going to tell you what those are in this. And we looked at this and we think 74% of them, of this 354,
Lancet said that like the methodology did not meet the criteria there in terms of like their selection process as well, which Jimmy's completely obscuring.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy I'll read some stuff. This is from healthfeedback.org. The authors list included several names well known for having spread COVID-19 misinformation in the past, including Harvey Risch, Roger Hodgkinson, and William Mackis. The last author is cardiologist Peter McCulloch, whose false claims about COVID-19 vaccines eventually led the American Board of Internal Medicine to recommend revoking his board certification in October 2022. It is noteworthy that
they're all part of the establishment.
Yeah, right. It is noteworthy that 6 of the 9 authors of the review are affiliated with the Wellness Company. McCulloch is the chief scientific officer of this company, which markets supplements that allegedly protect against vaccine injury.
I mean, even the way it's framed, where it's like potential causal links between COVID-19 and death. Like, I'm not that familiar.
Put up the page.
Yeah,
this is amazing.
What is it? Like all green? And
Get back to.
Is it in Comic Sans?
Get back to that pre-COVID feeling with some of our spike support.
Oh my God, spike support.
Yeah, kids living as nature intended. Year-round wellness for resilient kids.
Where'd you send this?
No, just go to wellness. It's the twc.health.
The Wellness Company.
Yeah, here we go. Remember the days? Pre-COVID days.
So I think maybe
before
the
your
Lancet,
innocence was stolen.
How the Lancet was so quick to get that thing off of their server was that, you know how bars will have sort of patrons that aren't allowed in because they're regular, causing problems. Probably all these guys that have a pharmaceutical, like a supplement company,
right?
Literally pharmaceutical commodifiers.
Except just this one is just like more underregulated. I like spike support.
It's more free market, so you can trust the medicine more because you don't get the government involved.
Let's JR and Philly says I go to Blue Chew for my spike support. Let's go back to the video again. Sorry. Here we go. Matt's driving solo today. He's going back and forth. 3 physicians independently reviewed all deaths and
independently
what does that mean?
At
Independent from whom?
Yeah, independently in the same boardroom.
78 studies, and after screening for our inclusion criteria, included 44 papers that contained 325 autopsy cases and 1 necropsy case. 3 physicians independently reviewed all the deaths
That's a
and
word.
determined whether COVID-19 vaccination was a direct cause or contributed significantly to the death. Their findings, this is from the paper, their findings, the most implicated organ system in COVID-19 vaccine-associated death was the cardiovascular system, 53%, followed by the hematological system, 17%, the respiratory system, 8%, and multiple organ systems, 7%. 3 or more organ systems were affected in 21 cases. The mean time from vaccination to death was 14.3 days. Now, that's an interesting stat that we'll come to back in a second.
Really?
But most
Great.
deaths
Yeah, it
occurred
is
within a
interesting.
week from the last vaccine administration. So they would consider those people, the CDC and the FDA and the government would consider those people not vaccinated.
What?
Because they don't consider you vaccinated until at least 2 weeks after you had your second shot. So when those people died, they were counting them as unvaccinated deaths from COVID. A total of 240 deaths, 73.9%, were independently adjudicated as directly due to or significantly contributed to by the COVID-19 vaccination. And so the interpretation, the consistency seen among cases in this review with known COVID-19 vaccine adverse events, their mechanisms and related excess death, coupled with autopsy confirmation and physician-led death adjudication, suggests that there is a high likelihood of a causal link between COVID-19 vaccines and death of these people in most cases. Further urgent investigation is required for the purpose of clarifying our findings.
Where did they get these 340 autopsies that they examined?
Exactly.
What was the criteria? They had to be vaccinated and they had to have died within 2 weeks of that vaccination, I guess. I don't know. I mean, we don't know what any of this stuff is. It's just it's just junk.
Also, creating a causal link is a very high threshold to clear from an academic perspective when studying something like this. Like, to make such a claim, that should immediately raise alarm bells for anybody.
Don't you understand? No one died from the vaccine because the CDC does not count deaths by people who get vaccinated within 14 days. Yeah. This is all just junk. You know, what's ridiculous? Remember how, like, when you get the vaccination, particularly early on, you had to wait 15 minutes at the place? That was just so that they could say that this was not an adverse reaction to the vaccine because you didn't really get vaccinated yet because we don't count it for 2 weeks. It's just absurd. The idea that they don't count vaccinations for adverse effects until 2 weeks out is just gunk. They don't count it in terms of the efficacy of the vaccine to mitigate the implications of COVID. That's it.
Right.
This healthfeedback.org write-up keyed in on something from the methods section that he read out as if it was impressive, but they write, the authors excluded a majority, 90 of the studies that identified in their search, while 25 of them were excluded because they hadn't conducted an autopsy or didn't report vaccination status. 55 studies were excluded without clearly stating the reasons for doing so. This is important because including or excluding such a large number of studies could greatly alter the results.
Those did not in any way support our conclusion, so we're not going to look at them.
Even those methods, and I mean, I'm not a social scientist. Brandon Sutton's closer to that, but I did do some of this in college, and the methods section he read, where they're like, we looked at a bunch of studies and used our independent criteria to weed them out.
Exactly.
Like, what are you talking about?
What is that criteria? If it doesn't support our conspiracy theory, we're not going to include it in the study.
Called the file drawer effect.
Also, we're going to pretend like this was actually on the Lancet.
Right.
It's a Lancet study, yeah.
In the same way that they pretended...
If you put them on the Discord, it's a majority report.
Exactly. I mean, it was the same thing with VAERS or whatever, when people would post alleged vaccine injury and they would count that as if it was some sort of verified case. It's total nonsense. pseudoscience by definition.
646-257-3920 is the number. We will take a couple calls, but not too many. It's a fun half on a Friday. Let's get to, okay. Folks, want to apologize for not covering the Ron DeSantis town hall last night, and also want to apologize for not covering the Nikki Haley town hall last night.
Because in our defense, though, they're completely inconsequential.
We didn't know they were happening.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to say that because we will probably cover the debate
next week.
Oy, oy, oy. Will we? Maybe. The debate between the two inconsequential. When you mix the two inconsequentials together,
right,
becomes of consequence. Maybe.
Perhaps.
Here is Matt Triplett, Senior Project Manager, I don't know where with whom, CNN, asking Nikki Haley a question about gun violence. We just had a situation where a 17-year-old in, I think it's Iowa, went into an elementary school, maybe it was a middle school, killed one kid and shot the principal, I think, too. And initial reports, at least from people who knew this 17-year-old, and then he killed himself, was that he was bullied and went in and took it out on these other kids. Unclear why. But here is Nikki Haley. I don't know if she was responding to this or the other almost daily situation of gun violence we have in this country. But here we go.
With the school shooting that happened today in Perry, how do you plan to address the school shooting issue? Enough is enough with politicians skirting the issue on this, and it must be addressed.
Pause it. She's not going to skirt the issue. She's going to come at this gun violence head on. Let's hear it. Again, I just got to go back to the beginning. No more skirting the issue.
With the school shooting that happened today in Perry, how do you plan to address the school shooting issue? Enough is enough with politicians skirting the issue on this, and it must be addressed.
I mean, it's heartbreaking, right? I mean, our hearts go out to the parents of all of them. Our hearts go out to the kids that are going to have to deal with this for a few years. Much thanks to law enforcement, to the chief who did a great job, to the principal who really has come out as such a hero in this.
This is how do I skirt
I have
this?
a mom heart. My daughter works at the Children's Hospital, and I worry about something happening there. My son is a senior in college. I worry about something happening on his campus. My son-in-law is a fifth grade teacher at a school. I worry about something happening there. Every day, the first thing I do when I wake up is think of my kids, and the last thing I think of when I go to bed is my kids. And so I know the concerns that everybody has. But it is time that we deal with this in the way that we should deal with this. Instead of living in fear, let's do something about it. We have got to deal with the cancer that is mental health. We have
Wait,
to.
what?
1 in 3 people have a mental health issue.
Like a record drag.
And then she tweeted it out. Like they had this already prepared, her team.
This is a set piece.
In the way that like Kamala Harris had That Little Girl Was Me t-shirts prepared right after the 2020 debate when she said that to Biden. But like, is mental health the cancer? And also weird to mix metaphors about health and saying mental health in and of itself. It might be a little bit clearer to say mental health issues are the cancer as opposed to the health in general. It's not that great. But
to wind up like that and say we've got to handle this head on with the second order issue.
Second. I mean,
the second order issue.
And also not deal with it head on at all, which would be universal health care where mental health issues can be dealt with, where everybody has access and the ability to seek mental health care if they choose. She won't deal with it at all. So she's pretending to deal with the 4th, 5th, 6th second order issue in this situation.
What's the chemotherapy we do for mental health, the cancer of mental health?
Yes.
Children's Hospital, and I worry about something happening there. My son is a senior in college. I worry about something happening on his campus. My son-in-law is a 5th grade teacher at a school. I worry about something happening there. Every day, the first thing I do when I wake up is think of my kids, and the last thing I think of when I go to bed is my kids. And so I know the concerns that everybody has. But it is time that we deal with this in the way that we should deal with this. Instead of living in fear, Let's do something about it. We have got to deal with the cancer that is mental health. We have to. 1 in 3 people have a mental health issue. But if treated, they can live a perfectly normal life. What we see is 80% of mass shooters are in some sort of crisis at the time that they do that. We've got to do better. The problem is we don't have enough mental health therapists.
And people don't have enough money to go to therapy.
She wanted to get rid of the ACA, wanted to repeal it. I do not think under her governorship they expanded Medicaid. Quite sure that she actually didn't. They wouldn't expand Medicaid. In fact, I'm looking at a piece right here where Bernie Sanders dinged her back in 2015 for not expanding Medicaid for, I think, 200,000 people. So, She doesn't, I guess she didn't spend that much time back then thinking about it.
Maybe not.
Amazing.
Yeah, like
not
the
amazing,
1 in
but
3
not amazing.
people. Yeah, 1 in 3 people should have more mental health, care. Like talking about school shootings, like that. There's mental health problems across the world. It's not an American problem. The American problem is that people exercise their mental health demons by grabbing a gun and shooting up public places.
Yeah, I mean, it's just this is the way that conservatives deal with systemic problems. They just make it about individual pathology and then also have no solutions to address that either.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 616 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, is this me?
Yes, it is you. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sorry. When you started doing the vaccine Jimmy Stewart stuff, I had to step outside and smoke pot with my cat for a sec. So
I understand.
All right. Okay. Yep. My name's Christian. I'm calling from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Christian from Grand Rapids. What's on your mind?
Well, one quick thing just to touch on the Harvard president resigning stuff. It's a very annoying issue to me because, it just reeks of this liberal, hypocrisy. Like going into that congressional meeting and giving those answers, those were some of the worst answers that could have been given. So,
yeah,
it's hard to defend these people when they really are just like the mediocre product of, the meritocracy that supposedly runs the Ivy League process in higher ed.
Right.
But also, my main reason for calling is I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I want us to shout out the Hill Harper for Senate campaign that's getting underway.
Oh yeah, someone emailed us about that. Was that you? We're starting to talk about, we can have candidates on where, but I'm aware of that candidacy. But go ahead.
Well, yeah. So earlier, back last in 2023, Hill Harper, who I had not known at the time because apparently he's an actor primarily. So I didn't know who he was, but he has announced his campaign. He's running in what was a crowded field that has narrowed down to basically him and Alyssa Slotkin, who is a representative around the suburbs of Detroit. And he is a progressive grassroots activist, worked on a cancer panel for the White House when Obama was president. He's also a card-carrying union member, a member of the Actors Guild. And he's really just trying to get a grassroots campaign set up around the state. He's based out of Detroit, so he's got a pretty decent amount of support there, but, trying to build out his campaign all around the state, needs a lot of money, not taking any corporate PAC donations, and up against somebody who is getting funded to the tilt with PAC money and APAC donations. So, definitely going to be, if Democrats are going to have any chance in the Senate, we're not going to need to elect these conservative, pretending to be progressive Democrats, basically.
Yeah.
And, we need Democrats that are pragmatic, focused on negotiating strong, Hill's all about getting rid of the filibuster. Not sending foreign aid to Israel or military aid. He's one of the very few political candidates to be in support of a ceasefire right now.
We'll look into, like I said, we got an email and we're talking about how are we going to do having candidates on? Are we going to do that? And so in the event that we do, we will definitely talk to him. Appreciate the call.
Great.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me on.
Calling from 832 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Danny in Texas. Can you hear me?
Yes, Danny in Texas. What's on your mind?
Here's the thing, Sam. The last few months, I just started to watch the Majority Report again. I had stopped watching probably like 2017, just due to school and work, and I understand a lot of things have changed in those years. First off, rest in peace to Michael Brooks. I always liked watching him. His voice is sorely missed, quite frankly. But anyway, Sam, I know when I was watching, every week you would have Cliff Schechter on, and ever since I started watching the show again, I've pretty much just been, I guess, just binge watching whatever videos I can find on the Majority Report channel. And I know the last time you had him on, I think was 2018. You were discussing, why'd you have David Frum on your podcast, or why did Cliff have David Frum on his podcast? And I'm just curious. I mean, do you still talk with him?
No, I haven't talked to Cliff in years. I mean, we used to have Isabel Gillies on all the time too. At that time, it's just with Chris Rosen. The show evolves. That's all. I mean, I disagreed.
Okay.
I disagreed with promoting. I disagreed totally with promoting those type of never Trumpers, without a doubt. But maybe that influenced my thinking, but it was more just like
that was
it's a show.
That we were.
It was a show. It's a show, and it evolves and changes over the years. I mean, we don't have the same. I think the only person who has been consistently, I guess even Digby wasn't doing that at the beginning. It evolves. But I definitely did disagree with platforming those never Trumpers, without a doubt.
Oh yeah. I mean I was just like I said, I was just sort of curious. I mean, I mean, it was a pretty civil conversation, I thought. I mean, I thought maybe it was some big falling out or something.
No.
Okay. Well, anyway, Sam, that's all I really wanted to know. Sorry if I didn't have any pressing
We should have a
questions or
separate,
anything.
but yes. All right. No problem. Appreciate you listening again.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Calling from a 614 area code. This is the most phone calls we've done on a Friday in ages. Never do calls on a Friday. 614. 614, or is it plus 61?
Yeah, plus 61.
Are you calling from a foreign country? Can you hear the sound of my voice?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, who's this? Where are you calling from?
Rory O'Connor. I'm a supporter of your show. I think you do a great job. I worked in the US for 12 years after doing a master's in laws at a college over there. So often I put odd comments about the legal aspects of it. But for undergraduate, I actually did a thesis on the Israel-Palestine situation. So I thought I might just add a little bit to what just happened.
Okay, will you just do me a favor and tell me your name and where you're calling from? Is it Australia or New Zealand? Or...
Oh yeah. I'm back in Australia. I was in the UK sorting out supply chain finance disputes, but I'm back in Australia right now.
What should we call you?
You can call me Rob Ocker. That's my name.
Rob? Okay.
Chat.
Rocco?
Right. Rocco?
Okay. Okay. So, I like back in 2006, and I did an undergraduate and a thesis. I was doing a thesis on Europe between the wars, but we were also doing Arab-Israeli conflicts. And what happened there is that was the final stage. Now, if you look at it, it was obviously by a war committee within the IDF, because the carpet bombing and the ground invasion went right through Gaza, and then they displaced the remaining population through to the end of the West Bank, and that goes to what's called the Rafah crossing. So they create a humanitarian crisis at the Rafah crossing, which aligns with Egypt and Jordan, so they can repatriate the remaining Palestinians into Jordan and Egypt. And that's why Iran put its warship out there, because it was an indicator saying, you take these refugees or we're going to strip your oil supply. And that's what's happening there. And that's why the IDF have slipped up into Lebanon to take out Hezbollah, because Hezbollah, believe it or not, are sectioned in where they're now passing through the Rafah crossing. So unfortunately, and it's really unfortunate because
I'm sorry, Rocco, you're cutting out at some key points. You said Hezbollah is doing what with the Rafah crossing?
You hear me now?
I can hear you now, but yeah, you said Hezbollah is doing what with the Rafah crossing?
Happened. Where did I get to? So basically, you could see it was a planned military operation designed by the War Committee within the IDF, because the carpet bombing and the ground invasion of Gaza then displaced the remaining population into the West Bank, and then they pushed that population.
Wait, what are you talking about? You're saying, wait. You're saying that Gazans have been displaced to the West Bank now?
Palestinians have been displaced all the way back to what's called the Rafah crossing at the end of the West Bank.
No, Palestinians are being pushed down south towards the Rafah crossing, is what you're saying.
So at the Rafah crossing, they're going to push them into Egypt and Jordan, okay? And that's going to be basically the end of this human tragedy.
Well, wait a second. Wait a second. Okay, we're gonna have to let you go because I feel you're cutting up, but I think that is certainly the intent. That is certainly the intent of. I don't know how much of the intent of the entire Israeli government has certainly been articulated, but the idea that Egypt and Jordan have the ability to absorb that many, I mean, put aside the moral implications of it, but that they have the ability to absorb these many refugees, I think is highly unlikely. And that they have the desire to, I think is also highly unlikely. From a moral standpoint, like, why should they? I mean, the let's say, I don't know, 70% of the Palestinians living in Gaza are either directly or the children of or the descendants of people whose homes were taken by the Israelis at the founding of Israel. But yes, is that part of their agenda? Very possibly. I don't know if they're going to be able to, but appreciate the call. But things got broken up.
Yeah, we didn't fully hear everything.
Let's go to calling from a 360. Who's this? Where are you calling from? We'll get to some IMs.
Hi, this is Chris from Northern Virginia.
Chris from Northern Virginia, what's on your mind?
Yes, I'm also the Phineas Earp that commented earlier this week.
Phineas Earp.
Talked about.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Wait, what was the comment?
It was about your disbelief that black support for Biden was waning.
No.
Going down to 24%.
No. My disbelief was specifically the numbers in that USA Today Suffolk poll where support for Biden dropped from 85% to 62%. I definitely think that there is a waning of support for Biden, and I think it's not just with black people, but I don't believe that it's 20%, and certainly not as a function of Gaza when you have such low percentages of people actually following this. But okay.
Well, the way you put it was that those people, you don't believe that those people, when it comes to election day, aren't going to vote for Biden.
I don't believe that on election day that Biden will get only 62% of black support. That's what I do not believe. But I also don't believe that poll is an accurate representation of even the support at this time. I could believe 10%, but 20% dropping in support of Biden, I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, that reminded me very much of Biden saying that if you're not voting for him, you're not black, right?
No, it might have reminded you of that, but I'm not sure why.
I think the statement's more just like that at this point in the election, when it's not really a general election windup and Trump has kind of been in the background, that perhaps that gulf in between might not be reflective on election day, which I think is a totally reasonable point to make.
Or maybe just wait to see if more polls show that difference.
Right.
Well, when we talk about this point in the election, right, it seems sort of cynical to me. So yesterday you guys commended one of the Biden staffers for resigning over Biden's support for Israel, right?
Yep.
That staffer is going to be replaced by somebody who's not going to resign over Biden's support for Israel.
Sure.
Right? So he's going to be replaced by a Zionist. Now, I also commend that guy. Like, that is a good thing for him to do. But if we're still going to support the Biden administration and hope for them to win in 2024, then all that means is that we have a more Zionist administration on our hands coming into 2025.
Okay, but hold on. But so what's the criticism? Is it the criticism of us for praising the resignations and saying more people should resign and speak out? Or is the criticism for us saying that Biden is the better of two options with Trump?
It's the criticism of you saying that Biden is the better of two options with Trump, because it's not just two options. And we keep saying that at this point in the election, right now we're 11 months out, but 18 months out.
Who is the other viable? I mean, let's assume for a moment that the Democratic nominee is going to be Joe Biden and the Republican nominee is going to be Donald Trump. All right, let's just start there. Who that is declared is running right now, do you think is viable to get the number of electoral votes to win the election aside from those two?
I think that right now there's not a viable option, but I think that right now, like you said, at this point in the election, we don't need to pretend that those are the only two options. There's still time to organize and move for a third-party candidate. Me personally, I support Cornel West.
Okay. And Cornel West is certainly by far the best of the lot. Now, walk me through how this happens, okay? Cornel West, I think he has a campaign manager now. I honestly,
not Peter Dow anymore.
But walk me through this. He gets on. How many ballots is he on right now? How much money has he raised? Give me a sense of this. Well, because if we're not going to pretend, and like I say, Cornel West, if he's on the ballot in New York, where I think it's going to be a state where Joe Biden is probably going to win, more than likely, I certainly would contemplate voting for Cornel West. But I don't know that he's going to be on the ballot in New York. But tell me what states he is going to be on the ballot on. Like, walk me through how this actually happens.
Well, it's still, I believe, too early. Different states for the general election have later times for ballot access. So right now they're working on I just started working with the West campaign, so I don't know too much.
Okay.
But they're working on getting ballot access in different states. But my point is that this early in the election, you guys have a platform that, has a lot more reach than other platforms. Like, I'm not saying that you guys are, mainstream media. Obviously, you don't have as much reach as them. But they've blacked out Cornel West and Marianne Williamson. You guys don't need to do that and carry water for the Democratic Party. That's all I'm saying. The only coverage I've seen of you guys for Cornel West or Marianne Williamson since Biden announced in June has been negative coverage.
I mean, but this is our show, and like that's my assessment of this. My assessment of Marianne Williamson's candidacy remains that I don't think it's necessarily serious, and I think to a degree, encouraging people to support that campaign when you have staffers resigning from there and saying she's not really seeking ballot access in any meaningful way, and still saying you should support this person, send your money to this person, whatever, that would be malpractice on my part. And from Cornel West's perspective, again, I don't really know what's selling some sort of
I don't know. I don't agree that we've been negative on Cornel West either. I mean, I just like
the only thing you've said about Cornel West is the fact that he took money from Harlan Crow, which was $3,500 he didn't ask for, and that he calls people brother.
That's not accurate at all. We also covered Jimmy Dore attacking him, among other things, I'm sure.
Okay, but yeah, that was
generally
about
speaking,
Jimmy
I mean, my point.
He returned that money too, as far as I know.
Yeah, but
yeah, he did.
But my thing is I don't like this idea that first of all, my assessment of these candidates is that they become serious when they get an endorsement besides somebody that's on media, whether that's independent media or like the New York Times. I don't really care. I want to see them have some sort of union endorsement or something like that. That's when Bernie Sanders got really interesting to me in 2016. That's when Cornel West or Marianne Williamson will get really interesting to me in this one. Now, generally speaking, we've always said good things about it, but I reject the idea that it should be our responsibility to try to promote people who look, if there's
I don't
somebody,
think it's your responsibility to promote, but I don't think it's, what I'm saying is, are you specifically going against, like, is it you're trying to convince people not to vote for them?
No, I said I'll probably vote for Cornel West in New York.
Would I specifically advocate for people not to vote third party? And frankly, I think Jill Stein and Cornel West are. But would I advocate for people not to vote third party in a swing state? Yes, I would advocate against that. 100%.
That's exactly my point, is that you're trying to play both sides, where you're like, well, we're not advocating for anything. We're just presenting.
No. Listen, I don't know how I can be more explicit than this. I do not believe that you should vote third party in a swing state. I have been so clear on this in the past 20 years. I don't think I have ever wavered from that position, because in the end of the day, I am willing to bet you everything I have owned and hold dear that one of two people, and this is just simply a fact, we live in a duopoly. Would I change it if I could? Yes. Can I change it? No, I cannot. Would me, if I spent every single day on this show saying that we should have a viable third-party candidate, I guarantee you it would be meaningless. And it would be meaningless. And I lived through, I personally voted for Ralph Nader. I did it in New York. And I can tell you that every time we go through this, every single time, the theory behind, there is no theory of change there. Now, I would like, I appreciate Cornel West's campaign if it manages to elevate a message, if it becomes a message campaign that resonates. I think it would have been better as a primary campaign, because there would have been a better opportunity for a message to come there. I think Marianne Williamson, her campaign, she was not a great messenger. The campaign had all of these problems, including stuff that I had nothing to do with. Multiple campaign managers coming out and saying, don't support her. What she's doing is not real. It steps on a
I'm
message.
not a fan of Marion Williamson.
Okay, but it steps on a message. Cornel West would have been, in my estimation, would have been much more, would have helped our politics much more to have run in the Democratic primary, not because
he wouldn't do that.
Okay, he wouldn't do that. But I'm just saying, you're just asking my opinion. I'm not telling him to do anything. I'm just saying that would have been my perspective. But there is no way that Cornel West is going to garner the number of electoral votes he needs to become president of the United States. I'm sorry.
And you're looking at history to say that.
Can I look into history to say that?
Common sense.
Well, I can look into history to say that. What was the last third party candidate to do that?
But that's my point, is that as progressives, like, I understand if this was July, the Democratic National Convention was happening, Cornel West was at 10%.
Walk me through what's going to happen in the next 7 months to change that fact. Just give me like even a rough blueprint.
See, unfortunately, unlike you, I don't pretend to know the future.
Okay,
my point is that
you don't have to know the future.
Has, and it's not being shown.
Tell me the path.
My point is that we should look at the past to learn from our mistakes, but we don't have to stick to the past. If we're progressives, we want things to progress, right? So we're not looking at the past as a virtue, something to hold to. We're looking at the past to see our mistakes.
Okay. You're talking about that we need progress in campaigns. I'm talking about I want progress in attempting to alleviate child poverty. I want progress in terms of getting more people health insurance. I want progress in terms of universal health care and of universal daycare. And I want progress in terms of decommodifying things like energy and health and maybe housing as well. I am asking you, right? I know we share the same issue, but we have politics, right? We have a disagreement in terms of tactics, okay? You and I have a disagreement in terms of tactics. And I am asking you from a tactical standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, how does Cornel, well, you tell me July, I could say this, not June, not August, July. Why July? Because in your mind, if it's July and if things are exactly as they are now, then he has no chance of winning. So that in that instance, you are predicting the future. But whatever analysis you're doing, I'm asking you, you have the platform now. Walk us through, not exactly what's going to happen, not for sure. Give me even a 20% scenario. What has a 20% chance of happening between now and July that makes Cornel West viable?
So let me say, I respect your show, and I think a lot of leftists respect your show, including leftist creators. So I think that if you put out the message that Cornel West is putting out, which is, for me, the American presidency, like you guys talk about how all those things you listed, you should focus on local organizing and local politics. I 100% agree. The American president is the commander-in-chief of the United States military and the leader of the free world. When I think about, you guys say your politics is about doing the least amount of harm, I don't pretend that American empire is domestic only. The influence that America has is global. So, yes, and I know a lot of your audience is going to say, well, it's okay for you because you're not worried about what's going to happen under Trump. I'm 100% worried about what's going to happen under Trump, but I'm more worried about what's already happening.
Well, hold on. I understand all this. All this. I'm asking you, give me a 20% scenario, a 10% scenario.
That's what I'm building to. A lot of people don't vote in elections because, especially the presidential, because in elections in general, because they feel like there's no difference in politics. It doesn't matter if it's Trump or Biden. There's no difference. And where there's no difference is in foreign policy. There's very little daylight between Trump and Biden when it comes to foreign policy. Right?
We agree.
And I think that's the greatest influence that the American president has, is in the subjugation and the abject suffering that the American empire causes worldwide. So that message that Cornel West has of ending that subjugation and that abject suffering, or at least lessening it, gets out there, which is not getting out there right now. He's going up against pretty much a media blackout. Then my hope is that more people will be motivated to look into that and support Cornel West. But if the only coverage that we get from the left on Cornel West is that he took a donation, $3,500 in a presidential campaign, and calls Harlan Crow Brother Crow, then that's never going to happen.
Well, I understand that's never going to happen, but I would suggest that if we say, and Cornel West's foreign policy would be 1,000 times better than Trump or Biden. I have there's no debate about that. But I'm suggesting to you that you can't even present to me unless you think you think if this show started talking about that.
If we do more videos.
I don't think just this show.
Okay.
But I mean,
give me
this is one
clue as to a 5% scenario. What has to happen between now and July for Cornel West to have a 5% chance of winning 265 or whatever it is electoral votes?
I think if Cornel West were to poll somewhere between 20 and 30%, I think that Biden would, I mean, it depends on when he gets there, and I don't really see it as very likely, but I'm hoping for it, and it's something that I want to fight for. I think Biden has to step down. If Cornel West as a third-party candidate is polling between 20 and 30%, Biden's not going to win.
Listen, I don't know if Biden's going to win now. Whether there is a third-party candidate, I think actually Biden is in very serious trouble if a third-party candidate is polling at 3%.
But he wouldn't step down because, like.
But he's not going to step down because of that.
He would love the opportunity to blame it on the left.
Of course, the whole Democratic Party would love to blame it on it.
Then let them.
Okay, but dude. I don't want Donald Trump to be president. I think if Donald Trump is president, it is worse.
But I don't care if 1 million Americans die if it means that 1 billion people in South Africa or in Africa and South America have a chance at leading a better life.
Okay.
We are incredibly privileged.
I get that.
And I don't care about American privilege.
Okay, I get that. But honestly, Donald Trump is not going to be better than Biden. And so you're looking at a wash in terms of that.
But you're talking about what's happening in America. What I'm saying is I'm imploring you to take a chance to fight for what's outside of America, because those are the people that are suffering right now.
Listen, I agree with you on that. But you're saying take a literally 1 in, I don't even think 1 million chance, 1 in 1 billion chance. And I'm suggesting to you that 1 in 1 billion chance is an impossibility.
Yeah.
And that the implications
it's an impossibility.
No, I'm not the reason it's an impossibility because my YouTube show doesn't promote that.
No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying that all of the liberals, all of the so-called leftists who hold the actual leftists hostage by saying, well, there's no chance for them to win anyway. There's no chance because you're not voting for them.
Let me just ask a quick question. Why Cornel West and not the PSL candidates?
I mean, for me, it's Cornel West has a track record, longer track record that I'm more aware of, huh?
A better chance? Because to me, I don't think either of those have a very good chance of actually being president. I think it's mainly a message. And to me, I'm kind of actually now waffling between Cornel, the independent candidates, between the PSL and Cornel, because at least you're building something with, as opposed to just what you're doing, Colin, which I'm sorry to say, just seems like expecting the media to do this instead of organizing.
I organize, and I think that you guys keep saying this thing about, well, don't put your focus on the presidential election, put your focus on organizing. You can do both.
Well, but you know what? Honestly, listen, there is one way to get a viable third party in this country, and the Green Party has gone the opposite direction. They're undoubtedly going to be on more ballots for their presidential candidate than Cornel West will be. I'm sorry. That's just the reality. And even in that instance, the Green Party, for whatever reason, has decided not to pursue getting a couple of members of Congress in, getting senator could be years off. But in the past 25 years or so, or maybe 30 years at this point of the Green Party, they have less people in local offices. I'm sorry, it's not happening overnight. I know we want there to be this silver bullet and this sort of, but it's magical thinking.
Yeah.
And the fact that I don't subscribe to it, I'm sorry. I'm not spending, the only time that I end up talking about this is when people come in and go like, why don't you subscribe to what I perceive you to have, which is magical thinking. This is, I wish it was a different way. It's not a different way. It is the way that it is right now. And the way for it to change would be to build on a local level where you could actually go in and it's, even within the Democratic Party, it's hard
you don't
to
have
get
to choose.
Well, but you know what?
It's not like
no, you know what you
or.
do? Because this is exactly 100% the argument that I had in 2016 with people. And the fact of the matter is, I said then in July of 2016, if we get Donald Trump, the left dies, nascent, left movement dies in this country, and we will get the functional equivalent of Obama after Bush. And we got Joe Biden. Now, I didn't expect Joe Biden because I thought there was no way they're going to bring that relic back. I thought maybe, Klobuchar or whomever it was. I don't know. But the idea that if the left is going to grow and there's going to be any progress, you need the foil to be as far left within the context of of American politics as possible, which is usually like a Democratic centrist. You need that person to be as far left because that opens up space on the left for that person to be the person you're fighting against. But as soon as it becomes a Donald Trump, you're in the trenches with David Frum. You're in the trenches with the most, conservative Democrat. And that's the problem. And I wish it was a different way. But I'm telling you, and if you want to work for Cornel West, that's great. I hope his message gets out.
We hope it takes off, and then we'll cover it more.
But the fact of the matter is, it's not going to happen through this show, and I'm not going to promote magical thinking that he's going to be the nominee. If he's got a message that we can promote, I'll do it.
I'm not asking you to promote things. I do sincerely believe, one, you guys were talking about having Marianne Williamson and RFK.
Yes, and then all of a sudden there's a whole list of campaign people who come out and say the candidacy is a fraud, and I'm like, great.
That's not what happened. That's not what happened. Biden announced that he was running, and then you said, well, there's no point in having them on. I remember that very clearly.
No, dude, you have no idea what the conversations are in here when we're not on the show. I can tell you. I had told them, we're going to do this in September.
Biden announced that you said that there's no point in having RFK Jr. or Marianne Williamson on.
Well, listen.
But anyway, the last thing I want to say, and then I'll get off because I feel like I'm wasting you guys' time, is in the same way that people will say that voting for Trump is an acceptance of his racism, we keep saying Biden's a gaffer. He called Obama the first handsome, articulate black man on the national stage. He said that his children would be forced into a racial jungle if forced busing occurred. He's the author of the crime bill. His support of Israel is 100% zealous. He's been saying for 50 years if there were no Israel, we'd have to create one. And what he means by that is that we need nuclear weapons in the hands of white people in the Middle East to monitor and police the rest of the brown people. So if we want to pretend that Biden isn't racist, and we want to pretend that supporting Biden isn't support of that racism, then what are we doing?
We're not pretending that.
I don't need to pretend that Joe Biden is anything other than he is.
Well, then, in the same way that you guys will...
You want to argue to me that Joe Biden... You want to argue the difference between having a Democratic administration versus a Republican administration? Do you want to go through the numbers?
I don't really care about domestic policy.
Okay, foreign policy. Tell me about the drone war. How many people died under Donald Trump with the drones, and how many people did with?
Then let's talk about Obama then.
Hey, listen. I'll tell you how many interviews I did about the drone war under Obama. How many about his
But you said the
assassination.
difference between a Democratic administration and a Republican administration. You can't leave out Obama.
Quantify it. I mean, what do you want to
I don't know off the top of my head.
You should look it up. It's
well,
a
you're just telling me you're sitting here trying to beat me up about it, and if you don't know,
you should know that. Actually, honestly, it's bad that you don't know.
So
It's
if
a
I
bad
don't
look
know
that
it
you
off
don't
the
know
top of my head.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll explain
I don't
to you.
care.
Trump expanded it.
I agree Trump expanded it. But
And Biden completely almost got rid of it totally.
That doesn't change the fact that when it comes to foreign policy, Cornel West, like you said,
But he's not going to be president.
That's what
He's not going to be president.
He's not going to be.
PSO.
Yeah, you're saying he's not going to be president, and he's not going to be president because you're saying he's not going to be president.
No, you overstate our importance.
Hold on.
That's
hold
magical
on.
thinking.
I want you to
Larger
tell
left.
you the reason why Cornel West is not going to be president is not because of what Sam Seder says.
Not you specifically, but
Okay, and
people
not
aren't gonna vote
Emma,
for him.
and not Matt.
I'm not saying anybody specifically on
Then
your
the
show.
media,
I
fine.
am
But
saying,
even if the media,
no, not
even if the media gave him
The
coverage, no,
reason why
listen,
Cornel
listen.
West is not going
I
to
am
be president
saying-
is because a majority of Americans will not vote for him.
Yes, and those majority of Americans, right, that say they will not vote for him are saying they will not vote for him because he doesn't have a chance of being president.
No,
It's a losing
they are
game.
not.
That's not
The
true.
majority of
Okay,
Americans
if
have
Cornel
no
West
idea.
had a chance of-
I'll tell
of
you the
winning,
reasons
would you
why
vote for
Cornel
him?
West is not going to be president. Majority of Americans don't know who he is. Majority of Americans, if they knew he was, would not vote for him. That is the nature of America. The majority of Americans also have other candidates that they might like over him, like Donald Trump, or like Jill Stein, or like Joe Manchin if he jumps in, or RFK. The majority of Americans will not hear about him, not because of a YouTube show, but because of the nature of our elections and the nature of the
not just
Supreme
YouTube.
Court. And the nature of the Supreme Court and the idea of campaign money that is necessary to win. It is, you can't just, like the idea that, like, even if you think America is the type of country where Cornel West, even if he spent $1 billion, because there will be $1 billion, let's say $500 million, you think that Cornel West would win. And the reason why people would vote against him is because they don't think he could win. I'm sorry, dude. It's just not the case. I wish it were
I don't
different.
know if he'll win.
I wish
I don't
it were
know if he'll
different.
win. I think it's worth fighting for. I think it's worth fighting for the people outside of America.
I
That's all
mean,
I'm saying.
listen, I would fight for him to be a congressman because that fight is winnable.
Yeah, and in Congress, I'm not saying they have no effect on foreign policy, but when it comes to foreign policy, the commander-in-chief,
I
leader of the free
understand,
world
but dude,
president-
down the road, then he would be president, right? According to your calculations, because he would have a national platform and he would convert that into the presidency.
just like AOC.
No, but okay,
Maybe.
so maybe,
Maybe she will.
But caller, just what do you think in terms of Democratic voters Nancy Pelosi's approval rating is?
I would imagine it's fairly low outside of her.
A majority
specific.
approved strongly as of the last poll that was done. 51% of Democrats approved strongly. 27% of those who lean Democrat approved strongly of her. And then the approval of somewhat is fairly high too. It's a significant majority of Democrats or people that lean Democrat that approve of Nancy Pelosi. This is the reality of the electorate that you're talking about here, of people that are either Democrats or maybe left of the Democratic Party or are in that orbit. The
Fair, and I
online left
apologize
that,
for not having numbers memorized.
No,
it's
I'm not saying that.
I apologize for not
It's
having
memorized. It's
numbers
just a
memorized.
sense of like, you just told me that the reason why Cornel West is not getting elected is because people don't think he can win. And I'm telling you that's not the case.
Yes, the case is that this is the reality of the public perception of like what
We just saw what
Democrats
happened
are
with the 2020 primary.
Yes, this is the reality of where people are, and they're so far away from considering a third party.
Well, then I want to move that reality. Then I want to move that reality.
Dude, I got news for you. It ain't happening in the next 7 months.
Also, I'm sorry, Cornel West.
And it's not going to happen in the next 4 years or the 4 years after that or the 4 years after that. Every election is too important to break the duopoly. I get it. It's never time to talk about guns.
This is not the way to break the
It's not the way to do it.
This is not the way to break the duopoly.
The way to do it is to build a on the ground, to build a party that can actually sort of come in and leverage some of their strength in the numbers of 2 or 3 or 4 people and an attempt to do it that way if it's possible. But this is not the way to do it. It's just not. Appreciate the call.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Cornel West is also not a I don't care what about Americans, I just care about the rest of the world thing either. That is, I think, unique to that, volunteer to his campaign.
People can, attach themselves to a campaign for whatever reason they want, obviously. But this is like, it's literally the second conversation I've had like this in the past 24 hours.
Like the UAW is doing what I think like we want to see, which is that they haven't actually endorsed in the presidential election yet. Maybe they're holding out for something, maybe they won't, and maybe they'll endorse the future time. But like this stuff's happening, but it's just not happening from the third party candidates because that's not where it's going to come from.
But we're going to have this conversation. I would say we will have 10 more of these phone calls over the next 11 months, I would say. Probably maybe more.
I mean, I got those numbers slightly wrong, but like I'm looking strong. I mean, the approval for Nancy Pelosi and lean, not very strong, and strong Democrat, all overwhelmingly positive as of February 2020. Like this is the reality of a voting base that you would need to move that entire number in 7 months, essentially, to give Cornel West a fighting chance. And those kinds of voters who are actually actively hostile towards the prospect of a third party.
I don't need to defend Joe Biden, his personally or in terms of like his ideology, to say that a Biden administration will be significantly better than a Trump administration. In some areas, it will be the same. In some areas, probably maybe a little bit worse. But it is always better for the issues that I think we all, to some degree here, subscribe to, if you have a Democratic president that people can agitate against, to either build 100%. The left in terms of an organization, organizationally, or to sometimes get legislation. That's just the bottom line. We cut child poverty in this country, I'll repeat this, by 45% over the course of 15 months with the American Rescue Plan. And we were a Joe Manchin and a former Green Party, Kristen Sinema, away from extending those child tax credits and maintaining a 45% cut in child poverty and opening the door to like, hey, wait a second, maybe we can do a 100% cut to child poverty. What if we were to extend it to, $600 a month instead of $300 a month per child? I mean, and this is, and people can say that's incrementalism. That's fine. But if you're going to do a revolution and see where that gets you. This is the nature of this country. It's not my choice. It's the reality. I don't know what else to say.
There are plenty of shows that'll tell you what you want to hear.
And we'll book those candidates because guess what? They are thirsty for bookings.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like if there was in September, we had been saying in the run up, I'm like, I'm not going to start this campaign until September because I just don't want to, it's just too far out. And by the time we got to September, RFK was to the right of Joe Biden. Marianne Williamson was bleeding like staffers. And I was like, what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point? What's the point? All right. Bringing back the spirit of Michael. Folks, that is it for our call-in portion of the program. Let's read some IMs. I mean, I appreciate the call. And look, it's a conversation that I am I know we're going to have a bunch of times, because
I just don't like you're accusing me of you're vote shaming me, when really, like, actually these people problem is that people do lesser evil voting in swing states. And it's like getting hung up on
my
that.
vote shaming is better than your vote shaming.
Exactly. It's preposterous.
And I am a huge fan of Cornel West. I wish he was running in the Democratic primary.
I would like,
because it would have been like a way of agitating for better policies within the Democratic Party.
He could have been the foreign policy issue candidate.
I would love that. I would love it if Marianne took off, if Cornell took off, or if the PSL candidate took off. We would all, and because there was such an appetite that they were speaking to in this country, then we would love to cover either or any, regardless of differences in their strategy. But
still,
it's just like
not inconceivable to me that we would have Cornel West on to talk about, ideas.
Right.
But I can, all right, let's go to the IMs. Hey guys, spent $40 on Super Chat. What about Biden being tried for war crimes, for complicity for Israeli war crimes? He must step down. How bad will that be? I mean, I think that's unlikely to happen.
I mean,
I'm still waiting for George W. Bush to similar war crimes. But yes, I do think that he is implicated in this. There's no doubt in my mind.
Kirby, it'd be nice to see him squirm.
GW from Vaskoshka. What do you think Biden's on stance on Israel has to do with his religious beliefs? Maybe some deep-seated apocalyptic fundamentalism? Gotta
he's Catholic.
Get that third temple built so Jesus can come back to life like a good little Christian? I think it's more like what Beinart said on the program, which is to acknowledge the settler colonial project that is Israel, is to have to acknowledge the same program for the United States. And that
Biden is an American exceptionalist in like a very profound way. He wrapped up that 2016 campaign speech being like, this is America, come on. He loves like this kind of romanticized notion of America, and he's applied that romanticization to Israel, I think.
Progressive stateness. How many total COVID vaccination shots has everyone on the show had so far? I've had 10. Is that up to date? 10? How the hell you've had 10?
Gotta say,
isn't like 4 the most you could have?
No, I've had
more than
probably 5 or... I don't know.
I've
gotten
two boosters, then the third boost. Yeah, I've had probably 6 shots. Right?
I think probably 5 or 6.
Yeah.
I don't know if this person is being serious about that. 4. Fritzy, I'm submitting a bill to stop the administration of shellfish. Every time I consume one, I turn red like a lobster due to the cross-contamination of lobster DNA and human DNA. Small government needs to step in and protect us from this possibility. Steamboat's Willie. Ryan's first book was on drugs. Oh, that explains a lot. Too much Sebe Day. Jobby Boonier. Arguing for accelerationism after we've had 4 years of Trump disproving that acceleration doesn't get us more leftwards, despite a pandemic with unprecedented government intervention and liberal fiscal policy, is just being a baby who breaks toys. Well, I mean, I think the caller made it clear that he doesn't care about domestic politics.
It should be an opportunity. Like the thing about having a Democrat in charge right now is it should be an opportunity for the left to organize. And I worry that organizing just around a presidential campaign instead of like a socialist party is a mistake.
It's a waste of resources in many respects, I think. But John from Colorado, like Bernie's campaign was very helpful, I think, in organizing people.
Yeah.
But it was, and he started it off as a message campaign. There's no doubt about it. I know for a fact that he did not get serious about the idea that he could win until the campaign was, basically until after Iowa, which was way too late. But I certainly was excited about his campaign. I'm talking 2016. I wanted him to win. I thought he could win. And there was a specific message he had one message, and that was money in politics.
I also thought he was the
Oligarchs.
best candidate in the general election in 2016 too.
Well, I think that he was, and I also think that, frankly, I think that what's his face, Mike Malone. What
Anybody but Clinton might have been a better candidate.
My saying was Malone would have won or whatever.
No. It's Mike. Jesus,
the guitar guy.
Not the guitar guy. He was,
no,
he was
tall,
the mayor of Baltimore.
Tall. Yeah.
Whatever his name was. Who cares?
Jesus, I can see his face though.
John from Colorado. Understand why people like the caller want a third option and frankly agree with the need for better options while absolutely believing that they're just not viable in a presidential election at this point. I've gotten pretty pessimistic about it at times. I appreciate MR's promotion of building up from local politics because that's really the avenue that I think has actual potential in the area of third parties.
Martin O'Malley.
Martin O'Malley, yeah.
I keep wanting to say Mick Mulvaney.
Andrew K. We need to stop waiting for a messiah to save us every 4 years. Focus your energy on getting progressives elected to other offices. We can actually win. Build an army. Don't wait for a messiah. Yes, I think that's true.
I mean, look at the way like DSA, like a lot of the agitation you've seen from unions is because DSA members are part of those unions and are saying we need to be more aggressive. Like things are like people get it. It's just we have a system that's meant to stymie it.
The big fall is on YouTube. How about a watch party? Maybe. Support whoever you want, Kowalski, you want in the primary, but when the general election comes around, you need to pick the party that isn't going to destroy the planet. First past the post, that's the best you're going to get. Even if you're in a safe state, we need millions of numbers to scare the Supreme Court into submission to not overturn the will of the people again. That is basically the only reason why I do not knee-jerk say I'm going to vote third party in a safe state. That is the only reason.
It's a good point.
And frankly, I think like that was my perspective in 2020.
2020, yeah.
And it seemed to make more sense. Train Boy, anything bad that happens to Harvard in particular and higher education in general is probably a net benefit to society as well as being very funny. I would love the Republicans to basically say we're stripping the tax free status of any university that has an endowment over $100 million. Let's just start there.
Yeah, hold my breath about that.
Lefty Texas. The Lancet published a study that started the idea that vaccines cause autism. You can still find it online, although every page has redacted, printed in big red letters, the doctor abused kids in order to falsify medical data.
Yeah, that Wakefield study was actually published by the Lancet and retracted by it, but this one wasn't.
Brennan from Kentucky, really tired of anti-Maria Williamson bias. Emma hasn't even mentioned her on ESPN once. Maybe this, the millionth message accusing you guys of sandbagging will uplift her campaign.
Maybe.
All right, 3 more. Catfish James, Jimmy Dore ending sentences with an upswing in inflection to imply these are damning facts is killing me.
It's so funny.
Tim Pool does a version of that, right, where he does emphasis. You know?
Well, Tim Pool does a light Rush Limbaugh thing where he's like gets gruff or like animated when he's reading something that's not significant at all.
Swim shorts. Look, I agree with the caller, but how racist is Biden? But he needs to realize that masturbating in the voting booth isn't change. It's a crime.
Jesus.
I mean, if you never wanted to vote for a racist, you'd probably have never voted for president.
Exactly.
Yes. All right, the final IM of the day, the week, the first week. Mickey 7, Teddy Roosevelt ran as a third-party candidate, and his face is carved in Mount Rushmore. He did, didn't he? Did he run as a third party?
Yeah, I did the Bull Moose, but he was already president by that point. Like, it helps if you
if you already presidency. I'm all in favor of that.
Biden wants to run as a Green Party candidate.
Also, let me remind you guys of that progressive third-party champion, President Nader,
who now says lesser evil.
Yes.
Oh,
he does. I think he endorsed Biden.
Yeah.
Matt, Emma, great job today. Caller who was on for Phineas and Herb, who was on for 30 minutes. Also, great job today. Folks, it's going to be a crazy next 11 months, 10 months. Wait, 11 months, right? Almost to the day.
Yeah.
Actually. We'll see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and